From the outside looking in, Patrick Bet-David is the living embodiment of the American dream. He's a first-generation Iranian immigrant who moved to the US, served in the military, built a multi-million-dollar business empire, who then went on to become one of the most influential voices in American politics through his incredible podcasting skills.
How much money can I give you for you to become gay tomorrow? Can I give you $1 billion? What do I need to do to convert you into being gay? You don't think I could convert you to being gay?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But once you look past the surface, Patrick's story becomes less about inspiration and more about exploitation. Because behind the carefully crafted facade that he puts on, we find a man who spent almost 15 years of his life running one of the most predatory types of businesses in all of America, a multi-level marketing insurance company called PHP Agency, where instead of focusing on actually selling insurance, their real goal was to recruit people into a scheme, which promised them a rags to riches story just like Patrick's.
I know a lot of people have been contacting us because just in the last week, we got 2 new people making over $1 million a year income. You know, we have people that are doing stuff that they've never done before. We had a record-breaking year in $100,000 earners, $250,000 earners, new $500,000 earners, new $750,000 earners, new $1 million earners.
While Patrick was telling people the agents at his company were making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, what he conveniently failed to mention was that the company was built off the backs of people who barely made enough to pay for a McChicken. Yet, at the same time, he was teaching his fans things like how to build wealth on his YouTube channel, Valuetainment, even though behind the scenes, he was actively trying to recruit people into an industry where 99% end up losing money.
You realize how much hypocrisy there is for that, though there's contradiction to that.
And if that wasn't bad enough, after more than a decade of ripping off the American general public with this MLM, Patrick sold the company. Then he turned around and started LARPing as a patriotic right-wing political commentator. And somehow, it's all working, as Patrick and his media brand are slowly becoming household names in the political sphere, gaining millions of subscribers every year and hundreds of thousands of views every single day, yet almost nobody ever calls him out. But I see Patrick for exactly what he is, a master manipulator who has perfected the art of cashing in on people's trust in him and exploiting the American dream. So today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into PHP, the groundbreaking interviews he does, his opportunistic political grift, and surprising ability to get worse over time, and of course, the future of Valuetainment.
Surprise, surprise, motherfucker! The king is back!
What we do here is go back.
Nowadays, Patrick is known on YouTube as a right-wing political commentator, but he didn't start out that way. He originally built his channel Valuetainment by making excellent educational videos about entrepreneurship. And as a multi-millionaire entrepreneur myself, I'd be the first to admit that I used to love Patrick's content. I'd even go as far as saying that Valuetainment used to be one of the best resources for real-world business advice back in the day.
Look, there's 2 ways you can learn about business. One of the ways is go to college, learn a bunch of theories by professors who have probably never ran a business before, or you can watch Valuetainment, ran by entrepreneurs who have built and sold businesses, and you can learn from our mistakes and what we did right. And by the way, I'm willing to bet anybody who goes and takes this boring route versus watches Valuetainment, I'm putting my money, this person who watches Valuetainment is gonna beat the person who goes to college.
But while Patrick was promoting Valuetainment as the best place to learn about entrepreneurship, he wasn't exactly very transparent about his own business. And that's why if you watch his old videos, or even his podcast nowadays, all he ever really says about PHP is that it was an insurance company that he ran and sold a few years back, if anything at all, which wasn't just a minor oversight or a mistake, it was a deliberate strategy to keep his fans in the dark about what really went on at PHP, because actually digging into the details would reveal a lot of information that Patrick doesn't want out there. But to be honest, as a former fan of Patrick's,
I'm tired of getting the taste of them. I want the whole load.
So what is PHP actually? Well, the name stands for People Helping People, and it's a life insurance and securities MLM company. If you're not familiar with MLMs, they're essentially legal pyramid schemes with a product attached to it. to it. The main difference between the two is in how the money is actually made. MLMs rely primarily on product sales, and pyramid schemes rely mostly on recruitment.
If distributors' earnings come primarily from selling products to actual customers outside of the company, that is probably a legitimate business. But if those earnings come primarily from selling product to the distributors you've recruited below you, and their sales of product to the distributors they've recruited below them, all within the company, that may be a pyramid scheme.
Now, MLMs are not illegal. Pyramid schemes are illegal. However, I think PHP does a great job of blurring the lines between the two by prioritizing recruiting over actually trying to sell insurance. A perfect example of this would be the PHP website itself, where as soon as you go on the site, the direct call to action is to join our team 3 separate times, and the top 2 tabs are focused on recruiting instead of trying to sell insurance, which you would assume would be the primary goal of an insurance company. And they also use typical shady MLM language on the front page like financial freedom and a career for you, which again has nothing to do with the insurance they sell. But hey, maybe PHP forgot about their customers. I mean, who needs those? Not PHP, of course, because in my opinion, the true product at PHP isn't actually the insurance policies, but rather the endless stream of new recruits. Again, this is proven by their own website, where they claim to have sold 450,000 policies since the company's inception in 2009, which sounds impressive until you realize they have 45,000 agents. That means on average, each agent has sold about 10 insurance policies, or less than 1 per year. So based on the statistics, their agents are either clearly more focused on recruiting new agents into the company, or the average PHP agent has sales skills like this.
Hello, I want to buy life insurance. No. Why not? Because you are fat, and I already hit my quota of 1 sale per year this year. Are you being fat phobic? Your hairline is clapped, buddy. Yes, I am, and I asked for this cut. Now get out of my face, so I can get back to recruiting. Actually come back. I have a secret to share with you. Do you want to get rich and join my company? I help people achieve financial freedom by enhancing their lives. Get out of my face with that pyramid scheme stuff, little bro. Okay, get out.
And the reason why PHP is so focused on bringing new agents in instead of actually selling insurance is because their entire business model revolves around charging each new agent a $200 initiation fee to join the company. So the company profits from each new recruit, even if they never sell a single insurance policy. On top of that, PHP also charges their agents an annual fee of either $99 or $180, so they're actually getting paid regardless of performance in 2 separate ways. This creates a clear conflict of interest because the guaranteed income from each new recruit reduces the company's incentive to provide the best possible training, since they still profit even if an agent never sells anything. But putting that aside, these fees make absolutely no sense, because selling insurance is a job, not a passion project. Nobody's out there shilling term life insurance to their 19-year-old niece for fun, so why are people being recruited into a job that promotes financial freedom in writing, yet they have to pay up front just for the privilege of working there?
What job do you know that you would pay in and be told like, oh, you're gonna make money, and be sold all these wild dreams, and then you make not only zero money, you lose money? That's the MLM, like that's like one of the hallmarks, is most companies, when they onboard you, do you think you will pay them or they will pay you to train you? Which one? A normal job, do they pay you or do you pay them?
Of course, at a normal job in a capitalist society, you should be paying your employer for the pleasure of putting the fries in the bag. I actually send YouTube CEO Neil Mohan a nice tip every single month because I'm more of a socialist myself. And that's essentially what the average PHP agent does to Patrick. Because as we can see here from this 2022 income disclosure released by PHP themselves, the majority of PHP agents make little to no money. 44% of agents make under $1,000 a year, and 31% make between $1,000 and $5,000. So 75% of their agents make less than $5,000 a year, which means 3/4 of these alleged insurance agents make less than $14 a day on average. And keep in mind, these numbers are only counting the agents who've wasted weeks to months of their lives studying to get an insurance license, and those fees are also on top of any additional expenses required to get the license.
There is extra costs associated with getting licensed, like it's an extra $500. So if you don't have almost $1,000 to put down whenever you get started, then you're probably not going to make any money.
So now that we know it costs at least $500 to join PHP, let's take a look at how Patrick used to talk about how much people can actually make at his company.
It all depends on how big you want to build it. We have a lot of people that get started with us that part-time, they simply get their insurance license to do this part-time. They get trained, somebody goes out there and helps them out, and you can make anywhere between $1,000, $5,000, even some make $10,000, $20,000 a month part-time. Then there's people that want to become marketing directors, similar to real estate, where you become a broker, you run your own office, you have your own agency, you can make as much money as you want to make with that, $10,000, $50,000. We've even had people make $100,000 in a month. And then you can become a chairman's counsel, which is somebody that has a vision to want to build a national agency, and that kind of income can go into the multi-7-figure year income.
Obviously, everything he just said completely contradicts reality, and that's not just a one-time mistake. Patrick would consistently misrepresent the truth about joining PHP, and although he wouldn't explicitly say things like, if you join PHP, bro, you're gonna become a multi-billionaire, he did lie almost every time he was trying to bring in new recruits, because he knows that if he didn't lie, he'd have to tell the truth. And Patrick is allergic to that.
When I look at the stories today and I look at the people, the life they're living, I remember when I first met George, when he always had an Infiniti, you know, and he always had these cars. He's driving a 488, got an Audi for himself, got one for his dad. You got Jason driving around in a red Aston Martin, beautiful, gorgeous Aston Martin. Then you hear Vargas buys a yellow Lamborghini, brand new 2019, 2020. And then Ricky just bought a black Lamborghini he just bought. We got a bunch of guys with Z06s and Corvettes. And then Sapala's just bought a Rolls Royce black, drop dead gorgeous.
This guy is the reason why humans don't deserve the right to free speech. Everyone lies every now and then. That's fine, but it should be a crime for someone to consistently say words that are that far from reality. Because according to the stats, only 0.17% of PHP agents earn over $500,000 a year, and only about 1% earn between $100,000 and $250,000, and the agents that fall into the average income bracket only make up about 2% of agents. But this guy's talking about Aston Martins and Ferraris? If Patrick were 100% honest about PHP, he'd show his agents 2006 Corollas and bus passes, not exotic cars that a very small percentage of agents can even afford to rent. But Patrick doesn't actually sell insurance. He sells a fantasy, because he knows that if he told the actual truth about PHP, no one would ever join. So instead of being honest, he creates this alternate reality where statistics don't exist, and instead, joining the company is sold as a path to quit your job and financial freedom.
What exactly do you guys do? So say for example, I meet him, okay, and I say, so what do you do? I'm doing XYZ. Are you happy with your job? Not really. How much money are you making? 80 grand a year. What are your dreams? I want to have a house. I want to send my kids to private school. What kind of money do you need to make to do that? $250,000 a year. How soon is, Vlad going to pay you $250 to be able to do that? Not anytime soon. What are you going to do? Stay here? You want your dreams to become a reality? I want to do something big. Great. Why don't you get an insurance license part-time? I'm going to teach you how to sell the product. And then from there, maybe make $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a month part-time. And then if you later on get good at it, you can go full-time, then maybe you can become a broker. That's pretty much what we do.
According to the founder himself, he uses the allure of high income like $250,000 a year or $3,000 a month part-time as a way to bring in new potential recruits, while conveniently ignoring the fact that statistically, an average person is far more likely to lose money by joining PHP rather than buy a Lamborghini or a Rolls Royce. So if financial freedom means pretending to sell insurance just to end up making less than a high school freshman that does part-time landscaping on the weekends, then maybe PHP is the dream we've all been looking for.
If there's anything I love seeing with our guys, I love obviously the houses and the financial freedom and all the good things that's happening.
I always loved people that the facts were irrelevant.
So with numbers like this, I think that definitively proves that PHP was clearly never about helping people. It was about helping Patrick and the rest of his boys at the top of the pyramid. I mean, company. A 4% chance just to make above average income isn't exactly high, but one might say that's every business owner. Entrepreneurship isn't easy, right? I agree. But the difference is that in almost every other entrepreneurship opportunity, people aren't monetarily incentivized to recruit other people into joining a business model, which factually doesn't work out for most. And this is where MLMs go from unethical to truly demonic. Because in MLMs like PHP, you're expected to try and recruit your friends and family. For example, based on this PHP document that I gained access to, PHP instructs their new agents to write down 25 of their closest friends' names and contact information so the company can use the agent's familiarity with them to try and recruit the people around them. On top of that, behind the scenes, Patrick would explicitly instruct PHP agents to try and use social media in order to recruit their friends and family.
Send 20 messages on Facebook now. Send 30 messages on Facebook now before you go to sleep. Ask them, what are you doing this Saturday? How are things? A simple message is how you doing. But you gotta do it now. And for those of you guys that do that, and you stay like that for a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, it's inevitable for you to become financially free. Truly, it's inevitable.
But when someone tries to recruit their friends and family into a scummy company like PHP, they're attempting to turn a personal relationship into a transactional relationship. And obviously, people get turned off by that. Because trying to recruit someone into an MLM is essentially saying, let me help you join this scam so I can make money off of you.
If you're somebody who's like looking to maybe go actually in the recruiting route, then maybe PHP would be right for you, but just know that like you're definitely going to lose all your friends.
Right, well, that's a horrible thing to say. I mean, then nobody should do it. Listen,
Right, I mean,
you don't want to be part of the NFL. You know about the NFL.
You want to clarify that for me?
The No Friends Left Club?
Oh, that's right. The No Friends Left Club.
Everybody in MLM enters the NFL. Because they pitch to their friends, they pitch to their family members, and they eventually, nobody wants to talk to them anymore because they're just toxic.
Yeah, it's pretty disgusting in PHP too. Like if you're not pitching somebody on recruiting, you're pitching them on life insurance. But it's always like priority to recruit them first. They actually make you feel selfish if you don't recruit. They tell you that you're selfish if you don't recruit.
We've all had that one friend from high school or an old job that randomly hits you up or that we run into, and after a few minutes, they end up trying to pitch you on joining this shady company that sells lotion or overpriced protein powder. And when they try and recruit you, it feels fake because they're not actually calling to see how you're doing. They see you as a dollar sign, not to actually talk like two normal people. My general rule of thumb is that the second someone tries to recruit me to a pyramid scheme, we're throwing hands right there on the spot.
Bro, you don't want this medicine. I said, this causes insomnia, it causes dizziness, and sometimes it causes death if taken in large quantities.
This strategy has actually worked out pretty well for me, as I'm currently not in any MLMs, but if I run into the wrong guy, I might just start shilling Herbalife or Primerica on the channel soon.
What other opportunity do you know of that's gonna pay a 21-year-old $500,000?
But you know what? Maybe I've been too harsh. Maybe I'm just not seeing the bigger picture. So let's take a look at PHP's compensation plan, because not only is it complete garbage, it's intentionally designed to be overly complicated in an attempt to confuse potential recruits, and it completely exposes the company's true colors. But of course, if you ask Patrick, PHP has the best compensation plan in the industry.
So if you're watching this video, it's probably because you fall into 3 different categories. Either somebody from PHP shared this video with you because you're thinking about making a move to PHP and you're wondering why everybody calls our compensation structure the sexiest comp plan and sexiest comp plan.
First of all, no human since the beginning of time has ever defined a compensation plan as sexy. Patrick is the first because he probably gets aroused by stealing his agent's time and money. I know that sounds crazy, but to prove my point, let's check out this now unlisted PHP recruitment video, which is literally called the sexiest compensation plan for builders.
Let's talk about our comp plan. Number 1, our comp plan position-wise, it goes from trainee, which when you get involved, there's a 30% contract. Then 40, 50, 60, 75, this is the premier position where you become a broker.
This allegedly sexy pay plan is actually trash because no normal insurance company starts an agent out as low as 30%. That is far lower than the industry standard. For example, based on the information I could find online, New York Life starts agents around 55%. So if a customer's annual premium is $1,000, that agent would make about $550 at New York Life versus $300 starting out at PHP. And because they're both 1099 commission-based jobs, neither company pays a salary. But if the low starting commission wasn't bad enough on its own, it actually gets worse, because PHP directly incentivizes recruitment over actual product sales by structuring the compensation plan in a way that makes it physically impossible for agents to succeed without exploiting others.
When you first come on board, the levels that we have start at the level trainee. A trainee is somebody that gets started with us, that's at 30%. To become an associate, you need to bring on board 3 business partners, 3 policies, $3,000, get licensed, you become an associate. To become an FA, you need to do 15 policies, 15 recruits, $15,000 of production within 90 days, you become an FA. To become a director, you need 30 recruits, 30 up, $60,000, you need 6 new licensed agents and 2 direct FAs.
The number of policies that need to be sold are the exact same as the number of recruits that are needed to move up at every level. And as we heard earlier, if the majority of sales come from selling to recruits, that may be a pyramid scheme.
Arrest him.
Wait, no,
The thing is, this still isn't an illegal pyramid scheme because Patrick doesn't directly tell his agents that they need to sell to new recruits. He just incentivizes it through the compensation structure by making the amount of recruits needed to move up identical to the number of policies they need to sell.
You hear these words, Ponzi scheme, pyramid, everything nowadays called a pyramid scheme.
Yeah, I wonder why, buddy. And I haven't even mentioned how outrageously unrealistic some of these quotas are. For example, moving up from field associate to director requires 30 policies sold, 30 recruits, and $60,000 in production in just 90 days. Most people are not recruiting someone new into an MLM every 3 days, and even in the small chance that they are, they probably don't have the time to sell that many policies to actual customers unless the recruits are also buying policies themselves. Now, later in this video, he spends more time describing the higher levels in the company, like senior marketing director, which requires 100 recruits and 100 sales in 90 days, which is obviously grotesque, but the higher levels are completely irrelevant given the undeniable statistics. So the next type of compensation that Patrick describes is the generational override, which is the percent of the commissions that agents earn from their recruits and the recruits of those recruits.
We get 10% first, 5% second, 4, 3, 1, 1, 1. This, if you add it up, gets to 25%. So far, we have 82.5 plus 25%. What does this mean? When Rodolfo develops a broker, we had Cindy at the top, then we have Rodolfo, which she makes 10% on, but if Rodolfo develops another marketing director, Cindy now makes 5% on that, then 3%, 4%, 3%, 1, 1, 1.
So instead of rewarding the agents who do the actual work of selling insurance, they funnel commissions through 7 layers of leech, aka insurance agents. And the reason why they do this is to ensure that the money from commissions flows upwards and not towards the agents that are actually doing the work. So the higher ups end up benefiting from the recruits' deals. And once again, the comp plan is decentivizing selling insurance and directly incentivizing recruiting instead. Because why in the world would the commission not just go to 1 or 2 or 3 people and more of the commission go to the person who actually did the work? Because that would mean less recruits, which would mean there'd be less people to cover Patrick's mortgage on his $25 million mansion. And of course, we can't have that.
When somebody buys a cell phone, right? Well, what happened? The sales rep got a little portion, right? Then the manager got a little portion. By the way,
can I just pause you there?
Yeah.
In any other sales job you could name me, including T-Mobile, the majority of the commission goes to the person who actually made the sale. That's how they incentivize people to sell. In PHP, in the example I just gave you, the first few levels of PHP are less than 50% all the way up into level 3 field associate.
Yeah,
So
right.
the first 3 levels of the pyramid, the hierarchy in PHP, you're earning the minority of the commission and the rest is going to people above you. How is that not just bullshit?
And the rest of the compensation plan can't really be described as anything other than BS. The guy starts throwing around random numbers and math equations, like my schizophrenic uncle at Thanksgiving. He talks about something called the Great Equalizer bonus and claims that agents can earn up to 198% commission, or maybe it's 168%, or maybe 175%. Honestly, I think he just makes it up as he goes. But the fact of the matter is, the compensation structure at any company should never require a college lecture. If someone is trying to pitch you a pay plan by saying words for half an hour, you can probably also smell their cologne through the screen. This compensation plan clearly is not sexy, nor is it even fair. It's a system which is intentionally designed to funnel money upwards while leaving the majority of agents struggling to break even. And ultimately, the numbers don't lie. The compensation structure does not work for the average PHP agent.
We're a fair company. A company bought our company. You know what the conversation was about after they bought it? They said, your benefits are too rich. We're going to have to bring it down a little bit before the end of the year. So no problem. Our benefits have always been above what others offer. No problem.
Putting the compensation plan aside, I also think MLMs like PHP are fundamentally anti-consumer, because in a company like PHP, the price paid by the customer doesn't always go directly to the actual quality of the product or service, but instead to sustain the ridiculous compensation hierarchy. And that often leads to too much markup for the consumer. And believe it or not, even Patrick himself agrees with me.
I'm just not a fan of a lot of these multi-level marketing companies out there, because they take a product, you know, like this product, let's just say is a nasal spray. So this costs $5 to make. They have to sell this for $50 to pay bonus, all this other stuff. I have a problem with that much markup. I have a very big problem with way too much markup. One, because the customer shouldn't be paying that much for a product. Two, because on eBay, they can buy this for $6.99. So I have to compete with eBay for $6.99, and I don't want to do that.
MLMs are completely different from other businesses because in almost every other traditional business model, companies grow by providing quality goods or services to customers for fair prices. And if they take care of their customers, they actually end up making more money in the long run through repeat business and referrals. For example, Toyota sells good cars for reasonable prices, and because most of their cars don't explode fresh off the lot, a lot of people end up buying more of them. In general, that is good capitalism. PHP, on the other hand, is bad capitalism because unlike a typical company that prioritizes customer satisfaction and product quality, an MLM's main goal is to recruit people into their scheme so they can sell garbage to the recruits and the friends and family of those recruits.
PHP, we don't buy leads, we don't sell, we don't go door to door, but we recruit and we find warm market, people that's in a friends and family market.
So MLMs are able to use trust as a sales tool even outside of recruiting.
Why did I choose this model? Because if I have to buy the lead, this is the cheapest model of not having to buy the lead. I don't have to advertise. I'm paying $10.99. You get to make as much money as you get. I don't have to pay you W-2.
MLM is the cheapest model to buy leads because the leads are often the agents themselves or the agent's personal contacts, which means that the trust is inherent. And with that being said, based on the limited information I could find about PHP and the products they actually sell, one of the main types of insurance they sell is an IUL from National Life Group.
We sell index universal life policies with incredible riders. Probably the most competitive index universal life policy in the marketplace today we sell is through National Life Group as well as Anaco. I haven't yet seen a carrier that can compete with the index universal life policy that they sell.
This guy is just so oily. I don't even mean physically, and I really can't describe it any other way, but I have to clean off my monitor every time this guy tries to sell me something through the screen.
The slipperiest, most conniving motherfucker on the face of the earth.
But oil aside, an IUL is an indexed universal life policy, which is a life insurance policy that also has a side account tied to a stock market index, which is typically the S&P 500. So when someone pays the premium, part of it goes to the insurance, and another part goes into an account that grows based based on how the market performs. But based on my research and 83 IQ, IULs are heavily flawed because they often cap how much someone can actually earn from the stock market side of things, while also charging high fees that eat away at potential gains. To put it simply, IULs are an overly complex and completely unnecessary product for most people. Investments and insurance do not need to be tied together, aside from very, very niche situations, and I think IULs are bad financial products for the average person. But don't just take my word for it, take it from someone in the insurance business who used to work directly with National Life Group.
I know for a fact that their top carrier on the Index Universal Life side is National Life Group. In my opinion, that product is very subpar. I used to work with National Life Group, so I know it pretty intimately. And so I think that's dangerous.
But let's just look past that, and let's also just ignore the fact that National Life Group is currently being sued for allegedly being an illegal pyramid scheme, and also for misrepresenting the returns on the IULs they sell. I mean, who actually cares about the customers anyways? The real reason why Patrick pushes his agents to sell IULs to PHP's customers is because IULs tend to pay higher upfront commissions for insurance agents compared to standard life insurance. In fact, by his own admission, Patrick even made a special deal with National Life Group to get paid higher commissions on IULs.
One of our relationships with National Life Group, they have a very popular Index Universal Life policy that's a Flex Life IUL, and that product, we are currently paying 105% to the field, but they have chosen, because we spoke to them about it, and it's arrangement with PHP and PHP only, they're advancing 100%. Let me say it again, 100% of 105%. If you were at 100%, you're making the whole target premium up front. That's what this means. This is why people are making the kind of money today that they've never made before. Many are quadrupling, quintupling their income of last year because they're cracking into the Great Equalizer bonus program.
Just to clarify this, if his company is making a 105% commissions, that means every dollar a customer pays in their first year does nothing to build cash value or fund future insurance coverage, and instead, 100% of the money paid by the customer in the first year is just being transferred to line the pockets of Patrick and his agents. If that is not anti-consumer, I don't know what is. So not only are PHP agents selling bad insurance, the company goes out of their way to sell bad insurance so they can maximize short-term profits versus simply just taking care of their customers and making more long-term. And from a PHP agent's perspective, when a salesperson is selling an objectively bad product, like IULs from National Life Group, that makes the job of selling more difficult because there's less demand for the product, which makes the salesperson's job harder and in turn makes the salesperson less money. With that being said, I think it's more than fair to say that this company isn't actually about empowering families and improving their financial futures. It's about chasing the highest commissions possible for PHP, which, may I remind you, stands for people helping people.
I don't know how you say you're positively changing people's lives. Like, it wouldn't be like, oh my God, we are positively changing people's lives on a daily basis. It's purely a business. It's for profit. If you do it following the certain guidelines and the laws in the state what they state, there's ways to make money with this legally. But it's not a legitimate business.
And nowadays, whenever Patrick is asked about PHP, all he does is start speaking in absurdly long monologues and stories, which makes it nearly impossible for someone to actually confront him about it. For example, in his interview with Noah Kagan, he gets asked about PHP point blank, and if you really listen to each and every word he's saying, his responses are simply offensive to the English language.
So taking a step back on PHP business model, it sounds like half the business is in the recruiting, kind of an MLM of sort, network marketing model, and half is in actual profit from selling the insurances. Am I understanding that correct?
No, nobody makes money from recruiting. So for example, are you familiar with how multi-level marketing works?
I'm trying to understand it, because I think that's sometimes what people have said about...
Okay, so when you think about multi-level marketing, who do you think about? What companies do you think about?
Amway.
Okay, Amway is a $12 billion company. So in MLM, there is unilevel, there is binary,
there's matrix.
Unilevel, bi-level, matrix, my ass, bro. You run an MLM. But because Patrick talks in circles like this when it comes to PHP, there's no point in anyone even bothering to ask him about it because he'll just talk about irrelevant stuff and deflect.
But the business model part I'm still trying to understand. Because you said no one makes money from the licensing or the selling? So which
no
part?
one makes money from recruiting. You only make money, I don't make money if I recruit you. I only make money if I recruit you and get you licensed and get you to sell so I can override you. Or if I sell you a product. But just recruiting you, I don't make any money.
This is nothing but a technicality meant to confuse the audience because he knows most people don't know the details of his company. Although he's right that PHP agents don't technically make money from recruiting because the fees paid to join the company don't go to the person who recruited them. As I showed earlier, the entire compensation structure is dependent on recruiting others. So, PHP agents do make money from recruiting, just not directly. But I think the best example of Patrick tiptoeing around the PHP subject was this interview he did with CoffeeZilla a few years back. Now, please do not ever watch this podcast in full. I'd rather just not live than ever have to listen to this again. But here's how the podcast starts out.
I got to know you from your channel Valuetainment, and big fan. And around that time, I found this John Oliver piece on multi-level marketing, and I saw you had made a video on multi-level marketing, and I was like, dope, I'm gonna check out Patrick's take, blah, blah, blah. But eventually, I realized you have this other company, PHP, I think that's one of your main business. Is that your main business?
I would say so. Yeah, I'd say that's the main business, yes.
Yeah, awesome. And then I realized that that is itself an MLM, and we wanted to talk to you about it because I think MLMs are extremely predatory.
By the way, do you know the difference between an MLM and an FMO?
FMO?
FMO and an MLM?
This guy is just so oily. CoffeeZilla did not criticize FMOs in his video. He criticized PHP because it is an MLM where he's ROBing his agents. Patrick is deflecting to a completely irrelevant subject because he knows for a fact MLMs are scummy and he knows that his company is scummy. If CoffeeZilla were to make a video about Howard Schultz and Starbucks' business model of selling overpriced coffee for money, Howard would probably just tell him to fuck off and not buy the coffee, not beg to come on his podcast just to make up acronyms. But Patrick can't afford to be that honest because his entire business is built on layers of deception.
When you think about multi-level marketing, this is how my career got started. I think you need to know how the story of my career got started. Maybe that'll kind of put everything together. I'm in the Army, I get out. In the Army, one of the favorite things I enjoyed.
Why even come on the podcast at this point? This is exactly why no one can ever confront Patrick about PHP, because even if someone asks him about it, he'll just go on a 4-minute rant about his conception and how his career got started.
I made a video about where I featured PHP, and I talked about y'all's income disclosure, everything. One of the overriding features that I'm critical of, and if you guys aren't an MLM, I'd still be critical of, is that the vast majority of people don't make money, while the push and the marketing is that they will make money and that it's easy to make money and that don't worry about it. It's a lot of people do it.
Like bags.
Does that it's like, hey, dude, forget about McDonald's, forget about Walmart. Like, come work for PHP, baby.
Let me ask you guys this. By the way, I love your content. I love what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say Patrick doesn't actually love CoffeeZilla's content. Of course, this person who got criticized in front of 1.8 million people is not gonna be a huge fan of the person who exposed him on a mass scale, which is totally fine, but there's just no need to lie about it.
Have you never been in politics? Because you honestly, don't take this the wrong way, but you do strike me as a politician, the way you, like, no.
Ultimately, I think PHP is an extremely predatory and shady company. If even 1/5 of what I've covered has any sort of basis in reality, it would be impossible to think of Patrick as anything other than a professional con artist. Because the entire MLM business model is fundamentally broken. These companies are structurally designed to funnel money upwards towards the people at the top, like Patrick, while the people at the bottom, who do a majority of the actual work, lose time, money, and relationships, all while being sold a dream that never even existed in the first place.
If you want to make money, you can make a lot of money in this industry. You want the cars, you want the toys, you want the travel, you want the private school, you want whatever it is that drives you. And I found the industry I want to be part of, and I know I'm going to be financially free. Because once you figure out how this thing works, you know it's just a matter of time you're going to win, right?
According to John Taylor, an MLM critic who submitted his findings to the FTC, 99% of MLM recruits end up losing money after expenses. That's not just bad luck, failure is baked into the structure of these companies. In this study, he also specifically said of the 350 MLMs I have analyzed for which a complete compensation plan was available, 100% of them are recruitment-driven and top-weighted. In other words, the vast majority of commissions paid by MLM companies go to a tiny percent of top-of-the-pyramid promoters at the expense of a revolving door of recruits, 99% of whom lose money. With that being said, PHP fits that definition exactly, and if you know the reality of the statistics behind this industry and the stats behind PHP, and you still choose to recruit people into a company like this, you are a scumbag, and there's no debate to be had there. Even if you just think about it logically, if Patrick's MLM business model worked as well as it's advertised, he wouldn't need to lie just to create an endless cycle of new recruits. The business would make money simply by selling the product, just like every other business. But in MLMs, the product isn't the commodity, the people are. And the product they're really selling is a dream that's been carefully curated to prey on the emotions of the weak and the vulnerable, regardless of the actual truth. Patrick fully understands all of this after 2 decades in the business, but he chose to ignore all of these flaws and instead chose to use this exploitative and deceptive system to his advantage.
So the culture of deceit and corruption grew roots and became the tree. It wasn't one bad apple on the end of a branch. It was the whole damn tree.
And if Patrick never ran PHP, I don't think Valuetainment would have even existed in the first place, and no one would know who Patrick is. Because in 2022, Patrick sold PHP to Integrity Marketing Firm, and that sale coincided with his slow shift into becoming a full-time content creator and political commentator. And in my opinion, this proves that although the Valuetainment channel was never a direct funnel into PHP, I do think it was a subtle advertisement in the sense that he wanted to use Valuetainment as a way to funnel some viewers into PHP over the years, although he would never admit this out loud.
Never once on my YouTube channel, if you watch my YouTube channel, you will never once see me say, I run an insurance company, apply here to be an agent with us. Not one video will you ever find. I kept the 2 brands separate. But what people in the industry started saying is, Pat, you running insurance? Yeah. Man, I want to be part of insurance. Boom. My brand elevated, the insurance company followed.
So although Patrick claims the 2 brands were separate, according to his own words, Valuetainment's success benefited PHP because some of his viewers were drawn to the business that he ran in the background. But just the fact that he had to run this business in the background says a lot, because if you're a full-time entrepreneur and your part-time job is making content that centers solely around entrepreneurship, you would be more than happy to discuss your company in depth on that platform constantly. I don't think Patrick was ever proud of PHP. I think he knows it's an extremely shady business model and company, which is why, still to this day, he doesn't put the company anywhere on his social media, and I can't even blame him for that. Frankly, I don't think any non-sociopath would ever be proud of running a company with numbers like this. But given how evasive he is about the company, I think that raises 2 important questions about Patrick. Putting aside everything I've shown so far, if the founder himself wasn't proud enough to frequently discuss the specifics of his company in the entrepreneurship content he made, what does that say about the true nature of PHP? And what does that say about the difference in how Patrick has portrayed himself on YouTube over the years versus who he truly is?
Fame and money has become more valuable than actually being a valued leader with character that's tough, that's stubborn, that's willing to stand up. If people around you are making money and their life is getting better this year than last year than the year before, is measurable, you're a great leader. We are out of whack in our priorities.
We look at heroes in a complete different way because of social media era. It's a very confusing way of what we look at.
He talks about values and how other people's priorities are out of whack, but the entire foundation of Patrick's success is based on deception and exploitation, because with no PHP, there would be no Valuetainment, and with no Valuetainment, there would be no media presence, and with no media presence, there would be no mic for him to virtue signal on. And although Patrick now claims to have sold the company and just brushes it off as something he did in the past, as of now, he's still listed on their website as the founder and CEO of the company.
How much you sell for?
Shy of 300 million.
300 million.
Oh, 300 million, yeah. Now you own 83% of it, and it was a cash deal. That 300 million is going to end up being $500 million because
if you invested, exactly.
No. The company I sold is much bigger now, and I have 25% left, and it's grown exponentially.
So even though Patrick may claim that he's moved on, both his legacy and his pockets are still deeply tied to PHP and their predatory practices. And no matter how much time passes, Patrick can never erase the fact that his empire was built on the backs of those he misled. And as we all know, you can't build a great building on a weak foundation. So as you would expect, Patrick hasn't changed for the better or grown as a person since selling the company. He's simply repackaged the same manipulative tactics that he used to grow PHP and applied it to a new audience.
Okay, so you get complete financial freedom. You don't have to work another day in your life.
I don't have to work a single day in my life.
There'll be another grift, though.
There will be. There's no question about it. Yeah.
And then you decide to be a YouTuber.
It's all a lie. It is all a grift.
Now that Patrick has successfully sold PHP, he's moved on to something greater, politics, because everyone needs to get their political takes from a silver-tongued MLM salesman. So, 3 days a week, PBD and his boys run a pretty standard right-wing hack show, and to be honest, I absolutely love it.
There's something cool about that show where it's like they sit down and they go, all right, here's all the stuff we're gonna get into, and he says everything that's going on in the news. So you go, okay, I'm gonna be informed now, and I'm gonna use this to start a business or buy some stocks.
I'm gonna get my own suit.
You feel like, you get your own suit with just the vest. You feel like you're gonna get rich listening to that show.
I'm gonna get a boat.
Yeah.
This guy's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm gonna move to Florida.
On the show, they have a great setup. Patrick is the host, and when it comes to politics, I think PBD is the perfect combination of InfoWars and Jersey Shore, mixed in with a little bit of I'm just asking questions.
I'm just asking questions. I'm just asking the question.
He's asking the question. I'm asking the question.
You're asking a bizarre question.
I'm just asking, the only question I'm asking. I'm asking a question. I'm asking a question because I'm asking the question. You know what the one question was? You ready for this question? What do you think the question is? The question was, how much money can I give you for you to become gay tomorrow? Can I give you $1 billion?
It wouldn't change my sexuality for money.
They also have Adam, who's supposed to be the more left-leaning or moderate voice, but because he gets viciously cyberbullied by Patrick's fans, he moves more and more to the right every week. Then there's Vinny, who's the more far-right conspiracy guy, who turns into the color of a tomato every time he gets mad, and we have Tom, who's the more level-headed business and economics guy. Through this show, his viral interviews, and his frequent visits on other big podcasts, Patrick has managed to build up this reputation on YouTube as an inspirational figure and a role model for young men.
Guys, we're in the great state of Florida.
Yes.
With Patrick Bet-David.
Yes.
An inspiration to us all.
Yes.
I just want to say thank you, first of all, because you've inspired me personally. You've inspired our team. We watch all your content all the time. I like to think of you as the American dad that we all need. You know?
And I gotta give credit where credit is due. Patrick's pivot from scumbag MLM owner to media mogul has been a masterclass in rebranding. He's successfully managed to sweep the shady parts of his past under the rug while crafting this image of an honest, self-made millionaire just by talking out of his ass for hours on end. But the fact that Patrick has a generally positive reputation on YouTube makes no sense because I honestly think Patrick's only gotten worse since selling PHP. Because at least back in the day, one of the things Patrick had going for him was the old Valuetainment content. Putting aside the MLM aspect of it, I'd be the first to admit Valuetainment used to be a great channel which offered actionable business advice to young entrepreneurs for free. For example, this video, 20 Rules for Young Men, is great. It's entertaining, practical, and educational, and it has 3.1 million views, so obviously Patrick was doing well making these types of videos. And just like these videos helped me back in the day, I'm sure they helped millions of others out there. But nowadays, Patrick has made his brand all about regurgitated partisan talking points and culture war content, which is a complete abandonment of Patrick's previously stated values for the Valuetainment channel.
I feel value is very much easily internalized if there's entertainment. Entertainment opens the mind and value is fed. So if you can entertain while providing value, it stays more. Instead of trying to force value into someone's minds without entertaining them, entertainment opens the mind. And that's what we call the channel Valuetainment.
After selling PHP, Patrick didn't need Valuetainment to funnel viewers into his MLM. So instead of providing either value or entertainment now, Patrick is covering groundbreaking news stories like an LGBTQ police raid in Moscow, which was just so valuable to the world, I'll just let Patrick explain it.
Police in Moscow raid bars over LGBTQ propaganda. This is a barren story. Moscow police raided at least 3 bars, including the popular Mongol gay club.
That's crazy. They ought to be ashamed of themselves.
An Inferno night, detaining patrons and arresting the director of a travel agency for gay men under laws criminalizing LGBT propaganda. What is this about, guys? Why is this a story?
This is political journalism at its finest, folks. Even the host of the show himself can't read the story he chose to cover without questioning why they're even talking about it.
Is this story you're sharing with me with drama about a police in Moscow? That's noise. Why am I even putting time into this? That's not helping us scale the business to the next level. I want to minimize noise as much as possible.
Obviously, Patrick's shift isn't about any sort of genuine conviction or spreading some sort of a message that he's so passionate about. Instead, Patrick's pivot into politics is a calculated move to bury his shady past by pandering to a built-in audience, which he knows will defend him unconditionally if he just says the words they want to hear. And it also allows him to churn out endless low-effort slop that simultaneously grows his influence and bank account.
The news can't have a day to be like, yeah, you know what, man, there's really not much happening. Guys, just turn it off. Like, every day has to be like, oh my god, dude, that's it's like, dude, it's not. There's really nothing going on.
A perfect example of the culture war nonsense they cover on this show occurred right before the 2024 election, when the comedian Tony Hinchcliffe made a joke at a Trump rally about how Puerto Rico was a
floating island of garbage.
And shortly after, Joe Biden responded by calling Trump supporters garbage. And of course, our guys over at the PBD podcast couldn't miss an opportunity to cash in on this juicy news story.
Here's what he just had to say about half of America. Go ahead, Rob.
Or Puerto Rico, where I'm in my home state of Delaware, they're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization is seen as unconscionable, and it's un-American.
Thoughts on this, Tom, when you hear him calling folks garbage?
Well, this really disappointed me.
Nobody was disappointed by this. The First Amendment gives you the right to act like you're disappointed, but the guy is 82 years old, and although I'm not a doctor, he's most likely senile. At the very least, he has aged so poorly that he had to stop running for president mid-election cycle after winning the previous election.
Going up to my granddaughter's birthday in New York, then we're going to watch a debate, and then tomorrow I'm doing 9/11.
Not a single soul was shocked or offended that he said something he shouldn't have said, unless you already made up your mind in advance. The guy is 7 years past the average age of death for a man in the US. If you're sitting in a podcast studio doing a 30-minute in-depth, nuanced discussion about how an 82-year-old man said something stupid, you are the stupid one. Especially because just a minute later, they show a clip of him doing something even worse.
Explain to me how this is normal. Go ahead. I don't care if he's the president. Like, what is he doing? He's deep. Listen, let me.
How in the world does this not discredit the previous clip entirely? If putting a baby's foot in your mouth 3 times in 10 seconds doesn't scream wash to you, I don't know what will. But this is the problem with culture war nonsense. Instead of discussing the systemic issues that took place to put this man in this position in the first place and criticizing the people involved in that, they spend 30 minutes pretending to be offended by the fact that an 82-year-old man said something he shouldn't have said.
This isn't new. What's very interesting is that everybody's acting like this is something that we've all figured out today.
Listen, the president cannot say it. Obviously,
this guy has not looked alive in 2 years. He's barely made sense. He had a good State of the Union. But for the most part, he looks like he's not in his own body. His skin is wrapped so tightly around his skull that it's disturbing. He's incredibly advanced in age. His voice is very soft. He seems to be in hospice.
And look, there's a big difference between politics and culture war. If you want to talk about politics, that's one thing. But these culture war stories are often trivial for no reason. And the real point of stories like this is just to distract and divide people as a way to divert attention away from more substantial issues, like inflation. Obviously, this Biden thing or the Moscow thing are just a few small examples. There's a million of these. Like 2 days before the election, these middle-aged men dedicated an entire segment of the show to covering a squirrel. I don't know, somehow that became a political issue. And when someone is going from educational content to obsessing over a different psyop 3 days a week, I think it's fair to say that is a step in the wrong direction.
Peanut the squirrel, beloved pet and internet sensation, euthanized after being seized by the New York State. Okay? Go ahead and play this clip, Rod.
Yeah, let's not do that.
But look, if Patrick doesn't want to do business content anymore, that's fine. It's his channel, he can do whatever he wants with it. But when a channel goes from how to reach your potential as an entrepreneur to talking about a squirrel 2 days before an election, that's not just pivoting into something else, that's broadcasting yourself descending into mental illness for money.
Elon's tweeted about this 20 plus times.
Who has?
Elon.
Yeah. He's tweeted about it? But bro, this guy's whole livelihood was this freaking squirrel.
These guys' brains are so destroyed, none of them realize Elon needs to be placed in an institution for tweeting about any subject 20 times in a day, let alone a squirrel.
I'm gonna be honest with you, I'll probably spend about 85% of my day arguing with people on Facebook about politics.
Unhealthy.
I mean, what else are you gonna do about it?
I know.
You can't let them win. You can't let a libtard win.
I thought I was a hateful, bad person, which, don't get me wrong, I still am, but then I started watching this political content, and what I quickly realized is that if all someone does every day of the week is just obsess over absurd topics for hours on end, they're going to eventually get a health condition called political brain rot.
Do I believe in climate change? No.
You don't believe in climate change?
Well, I think the climate always changes.
Those girls that are just liberal, like, they're not attractive.
Alex Jones, I think, is one of the greatest men on the planet.
I told you, conservatives want to fuck kids, straight up. Boom.
Conservatives want to groom their children, both literally in the way that you mentioned, like they want to
fuck them.
Do the
America deserved 9/11, dude. I'm saying it.
Every human being has something of value that they brought to the table. Especially
Unfortunately, Patrick now has this same disease, as evidenced perfectly by his 44,000 tweets, which has led him to stoop to the same lows as those he criticizes on his show. For example, a few months back after the Trump shooting, Don Lemon went on the air and essentially said it was Trump's fault he got shot because he's extremely divisive. Obviously, Patrick disagreed with this, so he decided to do some research and expose the real reason why Don is so stupid.
None of this started the right way. And in the story, it says that he was a child when he lost his father. Okay, so we don't know context, right? Why a man behaves the way he does. His father, Wilman, passed away when Don was a child, and Catherine Wright, and his last surviving parent. Don doesn't have a father he admires. Don's father, he died when he was a child. Don's father was married to another woman while he was with his mother. There is no relationship with his father. Don didn't grow up with a relationship with his father.
If you look at most people from the certain communities, they don't have a relationship with their fathers.
That's got to be racist. There's no way.
So he can't emotionally connect to your father potentially being killed twice. By the way, this isn't Don Lemon's fault. Don Lemon didn't do anything wrong. This has got nothing to do with Don Lemon. This guy grew up without a father.
Don't get me wrong, all the guys involved here are clowns, but weaponizing the fact that someone lost their father when they were 8 years old because you disagree with their political takes is about as low as it gets. And by the way, Don Lemon is 58 years old. He's about to be on Social Security in a few years, trying to connect things he went through half a century ago to his current actions without evidence makes no sense. But because Patrick has become so entrenched into all this culture war stuff, he's turned into a nasty guy, just like Don Lemon, using the tragedies of others to try and create a viral moment for himself. For example, in February of 2024, a 22-year-old Georgia college student named Laken Riley unfortunately had her life taken at the hands of an illegal immigrant. Of course, this became a huge culture war issue, and around that same time, Ben Shapiro and his former employee Candace Owens were beefing because they had some disagreements about the Israel-Palestine war. So, what did our boy Patrick do?
If you're America first, we, Valuetainment, have agreed that if you want to do the sit-down with us, a fair and balanced sit-down, the moderating of the two of you, we will give $250,000 to Laken Riley's family. Because of what's happening today with illegal immigration, it's the #1 issue in America, and I think it matters to the both of you. So no matter where you live, today we're raising our kids in America. So I want to make sure we're America first.
Yes, you heard that right. Patrick dangled a $250,000 donation over the heads of this deceased young woman's grieving family right after she died, contingent on 2 content creators arguing on his podcast about an issue completely irrelevant to her death. Why? Because it would bring more eyeballs to his show, not to actually help the family out because he's such a nice, compassionate guy. He was using the donation as bait. If Patrick truly cared about supporting the Rileys, he could have just donated in private, but that wasn't the point. The point was to use the suffering of others to benefit himself.
Why do you decide these things? Because I'm broke. Because I don't have money right now. I don't have money.
What would you say your net worth is with all this stuff, equity, everything?
I think I'm close to $500 million.
And we have to ask ourselves, if a man worth $500 million is willing to weaponize a donation to a grieving family just to stir up drama for his podcast, how low will they go? Because with Patrick, it seems like there's no limit. Putting the culture war stuff aside, Patrick's entire political career is based on nothing but empty rhetoric, just like the Laken Riley donation. For example, Patrick's whole political grift centers around speaking out against what he calls the establishment in politics.
You got the Soroses, you got the Larry Fink and BlackRock with how their ESG score, and State Street and Vanguard, and that thing's becoming a reality where it's no longer about Democrat and Republican. It's truly becoming more about the establishment folks and the anti-establishment folks.
In Patrick's world, the establishment means the deep state, corporate overlords, career politicians, and rich elites pulling the strings behind the scenes. So basically just anyone richer or more powerful than Patrick himself. Patrick paints these groups as part of a system working against ordinary people while positioning himself as a populist, anti-establishment voice.
If you're part of the anti-establishment movement, you're part of the group that wants to fight for freedom. This side wants to control. So think anti-establishment freedom, think establishment control. Elite, majority.
Whatever his opinion is, that's his opinion. I'm not here to debate personal beliefs. However, I don't think Patrick is truly as anti-establishment as he leads his audience to believe. Because, hypothetically, if you ran an MLM for years and you've knowingly made millions by exploiting ordinary Americans, who are you to criticize corrupt politicians or corporations like BlackRock? At their core, the problem with them is that they use the American people for personal gain at the expense of the general public's well-being. They're sellouts. And I think Patrick's actions prove that if he was given the exact same power as the people he often speaks out against, like BlackRock CEO Larry Fink, BlackRock would most likely be just as bad, if not worse, than it currently is.
At the end of the day, he used capitalism to get capital to then control the companies to impose certain philosophies, ESG, you better have this many employees, you better do LGBTQ. That's none of your business to do that.
Patrick would probably do the exact same thing if it made him a few bucks. At the very least, there's no evidence proving that if Patrick was placed in Larry's shoes, he would suddenly become a good person and decide to lead BlackRock more ethically and make the world a better place. But putting speculation aside, based on Patrick's actions and not his words, Patrick actually loves the establishment. For example, Fredo Cuomo is one of the most establishment individuals in the entire country. He's notorious for previously being CNN's golden boy and known for doing puff piece interviews with his brother, disgraced New York Governor Andrew Cuomo during the pandemic. And he's also the son of former Governor Mario Cuomo, so Fredo isn't just establishment, the guy was in the establishment when he was still in the womb. Yet, when Patrick brought Fredo onto his podcast for the first time, of course, he started the interview off with a nice, smooth glazing.
Chris has been in front of camera for a long time, and he shines. He's a star. And his latest show right now, Cuomo, airs weeknights at 8 p.m. On News Nation. He's got a YouTube channel. My favorite video on the YouTube channel was when you got your 100,000 the plaque. That was sick.
That's cool.
The Chris Cuomo Project. And we're going to put all his accounts below. Go subscribe, go follow his show. But with that being said, we have the one and only Chris Cuomo in the house. How you doing, man?
And basically the whole interview, Patrick and Fredo are just playing softball. There's almost no hard questions, barely any pushback for the BS he said, or even really an attempt to hold the guy accountable for being a blatant hack.
Nobody ever told me what to say or not say at CNN, and I would have told them to take a walk if they did.
So this man worked for a multi-billion-dollar corporation on cable television for 8 years, and not once did they ever tell him what to say or what not to say. That totally makes logical sense. I obviously can't show the entire interview, but it would be impossible for any rational adult to watch this episode in full and think to themselves, wow, Patrick really showed the establishment with this one.
I don't believe in the deep state. I don't believe in any of that, okay? It's much more nuanced than that.
You sound like that. By the way, your last 5 minutes, you sound like an anti-establishment guy, though, what you just said. That 5-minute clip.
I just think that label is cheap.
In fact, this interview went so well that Patrick then went on to hire Fredo for Valuetainment Media. So although Patrick is verbally anti-establishment, the second he got an opportunity to make a profit off the establishment, Patrick is the first one to get on his knees and so. And Patrick might say that hiring Cuomo was about hearing both sides, but it's one thing to hear both sides, it's a whole other thing to hire the elites into your company and monetize it when your entire grift is based on trashing the people like him. And now that Fredo is at Valuetainment, nothing has changed. He's still to this day one of the biggest frauds in the entire country. Back when he was at CNN, he was the most partisan corporate hack in the entire world, spewing any words his boss would tell him to. But now that he's left CNN and those paychecks stopped coming in, he's coincidentally shifted his entire rhetoric and he's now a center-left type of guy. And that probably isn't because he's changed for the better, but because once he got kicked off CNN, he realized he had to do that to stay relevant and profitable.
What's up, cool kids? What do you guys like? I've grown a lot between when I was 50 and 60. I've changed so much from my 70s to my 80s.
What the Fredo hire proves to me is that if Patrick was the elites, he'd be just as corrupt, just as power hungry, and just as motivated by profit as those he criticizes. Because as soon as he got a chance to confront the mouthpiece of the establishment in person, instead of putting his money where his mouth is, he completely forgot what his entire brand was built on.
Punk ass bitches from the right call me Fredo. My name is Chris Cuomo. I'm an anchor on CNN. Fredo is from The Godfather. He was that weak brother.
Isn't that your
And
brother?
they use it as an Italian aspersion. Any of you Italian? Are you Italian? It's a fucking insult to your people. It's an insult to your fucking people. It's like the N-word for us. Is that a cool fucking thing.
But hey, sometimes you build your entire platform on a certain viewpoint and then instantly cash in on whatever you constantly speak out against. It happens to the best of us, right? However, Patrick has also previously paid George W. Bush to speak at an event to grow both PHP and his YouTube channel, and I think we can all agree George Bush is the definition of establishment. He's literally the former president of the United States, and when he was in office, he was the most status quo, pro-military industrial complex, pro-corporation, bureaucratic president possible.
I call upon all nations to do everything they can to start this drive.
If that swing alone doesn't prove to you how establishment Bush was, nothing will. But Patrick's contradictions don't stop there. He isn't just cozying up to the establishment and paying the money at every chance he gets, he's actively trying to position his own family to become part of the establishment behind the scenes.
I said, so I went and studied. I got 4 kids now. We're going, we've done estate planning multiple times, but now I just sold the insurance company, so I have to sit there and see what am I going to be doing with some of this money that came out of nowhere. Goldman, Morgan, estate planning. Do we do this? Do we do that? Let's go study it. We put our research team, go find out who did it right out of all the families. Okay. The Medici family, 7th generation, they kept the wealth within the family. What are they doing? And boom, 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 boom. Great. Vanderbilt family, the money lasted 1 generation, maybe 2. The Rockefeller family, they're at 3 or 4. Okay.
So while he's telling his audience to resist the establishment in every other podcast, he's in the background studying the playbook of the elite families that he's supposedly against. If Patrick really had that big of a problem with these people, he'd probably be talking about how to dismantle the systems which give them so much power, not brag about how he's trying to become them. Ultimately, based on his actions and not his words, I don't think Patrick is actually anti-establishment at all. I think he's just annoyed that he's not yet in the establishment.
There are certain topics you don't have a lot of credibility to speak on. This is one of them. Speak on things you have credibility on. This is how much credibility you have on this topic. And when you talk about stuff like that, your history comes up and we have to talk about it.
Another thing which makes no sense to me about Patrick's political grift is the fact that he claims to be America first.
Me being from Iran, I think I'm America first. I'm a supporter of this. We're living in America. I'm in America, folks. This podcast is heard by 180 plus countries. I live in America first. This is my #1 priority as a country. It's that simple.
And that's amazing. I love America, but I'm not so sure about Patrick because he sells some great merch on his website, vtmerch.com. Anyone who watches the show knows this because they spend about 1/3 of the airtime advertising it, and sometimes he even uses his status as a US veteran against his fans as a way to show more merch.
One of the best decisions I ever made in my life was joining the U.S. Army. When I served the 101st Airborne Division Air Assault, the level of pride of America being the greatest country in the world went to the roof. If you are a veteran, or if you support veterans, you have family members, Veterans Day, we have brand spanking new gear for you to choose from, a whole plethora of options of what to choose from with shirts that say we support armed veterans, I am an armed veteran, dog tags, shirts, hats.
So he's trying to position VT merch as a patriotic right-wing brand, but I kind of knew something shady was going on here because obviously Patrick is involved, and nowhere on the site does it disclose where the clothing is actually produced, so I asked them, and according to the company themselves, their clothes are made in China, South America, and Mexico. But last time I checked, China and Mexico and South America don't exactly align with conservative, patriotic values. So although Patrick is willing to represent America first as a way to gain more followers, when he's given the opportunity to employ American citizens and pay them fair wages under reasonable laws, he outsources that work to countries with extremely questionable labor laws like Mexico and China. And then, for the final spit in the face to his fans, the guy has the audacity to charge $40 for a t-shirt made in China which literally says USA.
Oh my, you're gross. You're just gross, bro. I don't get it, You're just fucking net.
I mean, the irony writes itself. Patrick spent years scamming American citizens by recruiting them into an MLM, then just verbally says he's America first to grift to the right, but the second there's money involved, the guy instantly goes from Trump supporter to Xi Jinping supporter. And sure, outsourcing to China might save money, but if Patrick truly believed in his America first values, wouldn't he be willing to sacrifice some profit to support American jobs?
There are people that are very good in self-promotion, but they're not good in the delivery part of it. They become hypocrites. If you can master the art of self-promotion and delivery, you get saint status.
Looks like Patrick has officially achieved hypocrite status, but look, as a consumer, I love Chinese-made clothing. Almost all my clothes are made in China. The main difference is I'm paying $5, $10, $20 for a commie t-shirt at most, not $40. And as a true American patriot myself, if someone even offered to pay me $1,000 to just wear a t-shirt which reads Angry Patriot or USA that was made in China, Mexico, or South America, I would have no choice but to defend my country's honor right there on the spot.
We're gonna beat your ass! You just get that through your stinking traitorous heads! Excuse me, I apologize, but I will stomp your head in if you start a fight with me, you thug scum! Anyways.
If your number one is America first, this isn't America first. That's not an America first position you're making.
Another major contradiction in Patrick's political rhetoric comes from his newfound disdain for DEI policies. In this tweet here, he specifically says DEI is the dumbest idea on how to operate a company. However, this is nothing but performative nonsense because, according to Patrick himself, he built his insurance empire by deliberately targeting young Latina girls.
I'm going to bring young girls and I'm going to target minorities kind of like myself, so Hispanics, African Americans, and then we'll compete in the marketplace. We went that angle, and then the average agent today is a 34-year-old Hispanic female in the company. 51% of our company are women, 54% are Hispanic. We're the largest percentage of that in the marketplace.
So Patrick created his own version of DEI, DEL, deliberately employing Latinas. Now, Patrick might argue that his strategy was based on business opportunity, not ideology, but if the end result in both cases is companies going out of their way to hire people based on race rather than on merit, how does that not fundamentally align with the DEI policies he now speaks out against? If anything, DEL is even more cynical than DEI, because at least DEI is rooted in ideology, so it's an attempt to do what some people would consider the right thing to do. DEL is purely a money-making tactic designed to systematically take advantage of minorities under the guise of helping them. Patrick has seen these numbers, so there's no denying that Patrick knew for a fact he wasn't empowering young Latina women or anything. He was knowingly exploiting an untapped market to sell more useless insurance policies and collect more recruitment fees. Then, the guy had the audacity to start speaking out against DEI, even though his entire company was built on diversity, and that level of hypocrisy is nauseating.
54% of our agents in our company are women. And the second thing is over 50% of our agents in our company are Hispanic.
So we have women from all over the world.
We have all sorts of nationalities and ethnicities in our company. We became 54% Hispanic, while America's only 24%.
But I do believe we have a very strong presence in the Latina market, with at least 50% of our ladies coming from the Latin community.
We became 24% African American, while America's only 13%.
I'm a minority woman, and for the most part, I didn't think I belonged in that industry until you give me the right platforms.
We are figuring out a way to connect with the multicultural community because I come from the community.
And still to this day, they explicitly brag about how diverse PHP is, like how many minorities they recruit, the gender of their employees, etc. But if my political compass is correct, race and gender should never be a focal selling point to entice people to join your company unless your company is extremely far left.
This is the problem with the woke DEI agenda, because they're focused on race, on sex, on gender, on sexual orientation.
The sheer quantities of cognitive dissonance these men have is insulting to the human mind. To sit in front of a microphone and cry about the woke agenda for hours on end while sitting next to an inarguably woke CEO is immeasurably disrespectful.
Your woke bullshit that you're doing, your DEI, stuff that you're feeding down kids' throats, your hate of America, and then now you're showing us with this, your standards. Are you out of your flipping mind? Have you lost your mind?
Another thing which makes me really question Patrick's political grift is the fact that he claims to not be partisan.
Whatever story even your own side is saying, why don't you be skeptical a little bit and question it for yourself and see if you can entertain both ideas? I want to find ways to entertain both ideas as much as possible because I find myself becoming sharper when I do that, and I eliminate blind spots. Anytime I'm 100% one side, I have way too many blind spots.
And this is actually one of the things I used to really appreciate about Patrick and his show, because over the last few years, I think Patrick has used his platform to have more full-length discussions between people on the left and right more than almost anyone else. For example, they did this live in-person debate between Candace Owens and Fredo, or this one with Dave Smith and Fredo, and they've had a lot of liberals on their podcast like Sam Cedar, David Pakman, and Sink Wigger, and regardless of the opinions expressed or the quality of the episodes, I can appreciate that they try to bring different viewpoints together, especially in today's extremely divided political climate. However, the problem is that Patrick exploits these balanced conversations as a way to gaslight his audience into believing he's unbiased.
You got the guys who are, you know, the Rogans, the independents. I think I would put us as a center-right is where we're at. We'll be fair to everybody on what we're talking about economically. We're independent. I'm a registered independent. I've been a registered independent almost 20 years.
That is just not true at all, because whenever they're not bringing both sides together, the entire nature of the show is basically just Fox News but on YouTube. You can click on any of these podcasts and go to any random timestamp. 99% of the time, they're going to be covering any story from a strictly right-wing perspective. On top of that, most of the people Patrick has done advertisements for just so happen to be right-wing guys, which we'll get into later, but even just verbally, Patrick is about as partisan as it gets. For example, Patrick went on Piers Morgan's show a few months back, and he was asked to name a singular character flaw about President Donald Trump.
As a leader, what are his character flaws, do you think? I mean, if you were advising him, if he wins on Tuesday, and he gets another 4 years. My own gut feeling, having known him a long time, is that he'll be thinking more about legacy second time.
I want to say this to you, and I hope their team sees this, because let's go and talk the section after he wins. Okay? We're in a room like this, and it's 10 of us. We're all the establishment left. Number 2 will be J.D. Vance. Number 3 will be Trump. Why? I'll give you my thoughts on this. They're going to try to do the following, and this is what's going to hurt. Let's say you're J.D. Vance, mainstream media, CNN. Then J.D. may win 2028 and 2032. I think Vivek's going to be there. I think a lot of people, I think 2020 is going to be very, very... They're going to go try to find a way to destroy Elon and J.D. Vance.
You cannot make this up. Instead of just saying something like, sometimes the guy says and does stupid stuff, just like the rest of us, which can be applied to any human ever, Patrick monologues all the oxygen out of the room by going on a 3.5-minute rant about political strategies and J.D. Vance and Elon Musk. So this self-proclaimed independent is either so partisan to the point where he's convinced himself that Donald Trump is the second coming of Jesus, or he's so audience captured that he doesn't want to say a single bad thing about the candidate that he supports because he doesn't want to lose fans. Either way, that is just not healthy at all, and I don't think someone who truthfully looks at both sides would dodge such a simple question.
I call it the weave, and some people think it's so genius, but the bad people, what they say is, you know, he was rambling. Yeah. It's not a ramble. There's no rambling. This is a weave. This is a weave.
If you thought Patrick's ridiculous partisanship couldn't get any worse, in September of 2024, a few of Patrick's fellow right-wing content creators were exposed for being paid by Russian government employees to create content which promoted pro-Russia narratives. These creators include people like Lauren Chen, Dave Rubin, and Tim Pool, all people who've been on Patrick's show. And when Patrick and his boys covered this story, instead of strongly condemning this pretty terrible behavior, Patrick's take was extremely tame.
And, you know, everyone's going to mess up at some point. But you have to be also very careful with who you align yourself up with. You can have people that you're on your show, you're having conversations, all this other stuff. But actual business partnership with certain people, you have to be very, very meticulous, careful, detailed, all of that. Now, Tim Pool is a talent. Dave Rubin is a talent. Lauren Chen, very attractive, well-spoken, seems sharp. Maybe they needed the money. I don't know. And then you're putting this in email exchange, so you're incriminating yourself. You are a part of it based on some of the stuff that you've done. But It's a very slippery. This game, by the way, this will be a non-story in about 2 weeks. Everybody will move on. Yeah. Okay, that's how the news cycle works. When you're in it and you're them, you think this is the end of your career, whatever. In 2 weeks, you move on.
Keep in mind, this is the guy who claims to be America first. The fact that these so-called political commentators were being paid suspiciously large amounts of money, up to $400,000 per month, isn't just something that people should forget about in 2 weeks. It's something that realistically should discredit them entirely. I generally don't care if I disagree with someone's personal political opinions unless they're some sort of a super irrational extremist.
I also feel minors should get in trouble for messaging adults.
But when someone's opinions are being influenced by a foreign government, that's no longer an opinion. That's a bought and sold individual who's being incentivized to serve a foreign agenda, or at least stay within certain boundaries.
Ukraine is the enemy of this country. Ukraine is our enemy, being funded by the Democrats. I will stress this again. One of the greatest enemies of our nation right now is Ukraine.
And I can assure you that if 3 liberal content creators were caught doing and saying the exact same things, PBD and his boys would be screaming treason at the top of their lungs. But because these are people who Patrick agrees with ideologically, he comes out with this lukewarm, we all make mistakes, everyone's gonna forget about this in 2 weeks take.
This is the game of politics, man. It's all manipulation, deception, and surprises.
Another thing about Patrick's political grift, which makes no sense to me, is the fact that his main slogan is "The future looks bright."
The future looks bright after what just happened tonight. Go to vtmerch.com, place your order, tell the world that you believe the future looks bright. People don't believe the future looks bright today. It scares the crap out of them when they see somebody say future looks bright. I'm convinced the future looks bright, and we want 1 million people to word your future looks bright. It's so confusing for people who are pessimistic when they see somebody say the future looks bright. We believe the future looks bright. We fully believe the future looks bright. Fully. So much to the point where our entire brand is around future looks bright.
Again, I actually love this about Patrick and his show. A lot of right-wing guys like Andrew Tate and Alex Jones build their entire brands around fear-mongering, so I can appreciate the fact that Patrick doesn't do that. But the thing is, Patrick used to be a big-time fear-mongerer back when he was trying to sell people on the idea of joining PHP.
If you live in America, I believe there's never been a time more important than today for you and I to create wealth for ourselves. I'm talking you and your family being financially free, financially set, so you go to sleep at night comfortably knowing all the major decisions of your life are going to be taken care of. So why am I saying today is the most important time? Here's why. America today has $20 trillion of national debt. I mean, say you don't do it. Say you don't take a leap of faith. Say you stay the same exact place. Say you don't do anything different. How are you going to make a $500,000 income? How are you going to make that kind of money? How are you going to send your kids to the right schools? What if your kid actually can be a Major League Baseball player? And if he goes to that camp, he can make it. But because there's no money, he has to have a job working on the side, like me.
So he uses optimism nowadays because it differentiates his brand from his peers, but Patrick's past proves that he's willing to use fear when it benefits his bottom line. And it's not just the past. Still to this day, Patrick uses fear against the audience to score political points and to keep them invested in his narrative.
Let's just say you do that with 25%. You know what the business owner's going to do? You know what the billionaire's going to do? They're going to say, hey, let's go up 25% of employees. We got to fire a bunch of other people. Next thing you know, market tanks. And then think about the 62-year-old person, 64-year-old person who's got $750,000 in their 401k, thinking about retiring. What if that 750 goes like this to 375 because of market tanks due to bad policies with Kamala? That 64-year-old person that was about to retire in a year has to work till 75 years old. That's what bad policies do. They have bad consequences.
So Patrick's messaging just flips whenever it helps his bank account. When he's trying to sell merch, oh, the future looks bright. But the second he needs to recruit people to his MLM or bring some viewers over to his podcast from Fox, the entire world is about to end. And you can't have it both ways. Either be an optimist or a pessimist. Regardless, he needs to drop the act, because this slogan is clearly just a marketing tactic designed to set Patrick's brand apart from others and not a reflection of genuine convictions.
You don't really have consistent philosophies. To one crowd, you say one thing. To another crowd, you say another thing. We don't believe you. You're not consistent. We don't want you.
At the end of the day, when it comes to politics, I think Patrick is still just as much of a grifter as he was when he was running PHP. I don't think he's a grifter in the sense that he doesn't believe any of the values he preaches. In fact, he probably is a real conservative, but even Patrick's biggest fan can't deny the fact that his actions consistently do not reflect the rhetoric that he pushes adamantly on his show. Instead, I think he's saying the words that he knows his fans fans want to hear in order to grow his brand. He's leading his flock of sheep not towards meaningful change or genuine values, but towards his own bottom line. And that makes sense because Patrick is still a con man, so of course he's gonna run his podcast in the exact same way as he ran PHP, through lies and deception. And ultimately, Patrick being involved in right-wing politics is actually a bad thing for the right as a whole because he's now become one of the biggest right-wing voices in the entire world. He's getting tens of thousands of live viewers on every show. He interviewed the President of the United States, and on election night, he hosted one of the biggest streams in the entire world. But no one should be getting their political takes or information from a guy who ran an MLM for 15 years, right or left. I've met drug dealers more honest than MLM guys. Getting your political takes from an MLM salesman is just as bad, if not worse, than getting them from a basketball player like LeBron, who Patrick is constantly having a mental breakdown over. Because at least most of LeBron's time is spent dribbling a basketball, not having a midlife crisis in front of a podcast mic.
We need the next propaganda. What's the next big propaganda?
And he even takes it deeper. Propaganda, disinformation, deception.
Level of credibility being lost. They will protect that and use propaganda to blame somebody else. And all they're doing is just doing basic, easy interviews and propaganda, right?
Unlike most YouTubers who grow through consistent hard work and improving over time, Patrick didn't actually work his way to the top of the podcasting world. He bought his way there. You see, Patrick kickstarted his podcasting career by paying for interviews with celebrities and athletes like Kobe Bryant, Magic Johnson, Kevin Hart, Wayne Gretzky, Jordan Peterson, and Shaq, all at PHP conventions.
This is insurance.
This is an insurance company, yes. This is
insurance.
Yes.
The point of bringing these celebrities on was to attract more people to the in-person PHP conventions, which would translate to more revenue for the company through ticket sales and more recruits. Then, Patrick would post those same interviews onto his YouTube channel without advertising PHP explicitly, of course, and get millions of views. So Patrick was able to use celebrity endorsements to funnel people into his scheme while also using the celebrities to kickstart his podcasting career. This was genius if you ask me. It's a buy one Grift, get one free special. But the problem with Patrick industry planting himself into the podcasting scene is that instead of growing through genuine talent or skill, Patrick bought his way in. And when someone skips the process of failing forward in order to achieve something meaningful and instead buys their way to the top, they typically end up with results like this.
You look like a guy that you like good memes. You have a good meme game?
I don't even know what you're talking about.
I understand. Okay.
But believe it or not, this strategy has worked, as Patrick has somehow become one of the most well-respected and established interviewers on the entire platform. But because Patrick didn't achieve his position through actual skill, the main issue with Patrick's interviews is that they're often filled with absolute nonsense.
I feel like everybody knows what the right thing is to do, and just do the fucking right thing. Like, that's my religion, do the fucking right thing. You know what it is, you know, like, I mean, everybody's kind of got their confidence unless you're a sociopath or something like that. Like, so just do the right thing and, you know, don't f people over, you know, treat others as you want to be treated.
Fundamentally, we need to understand there is a massive difference between an interview and an advertisement. Interviews where a highly controversial person can just ramble and lie completely unchallenged are not interviews. That is an advertisement, and Patrick has been using his interviews as a billboard for celebrities to lie for almost a decade now.
You got some of these guys,
yeah,
that they've just read books.
Yeah.
They've never built anything. And they get on YouTube and they say you have to do this and you have to do that.
Yeah.
And how does one tell the two apart to say these are the real deal guys
dude, look,
to
you
follow
need to see
and
their
take their
bank
advice?
account, bro. You need to see their bank account. You need to see their freaking where they live, what they're driving, okay? You need to see their employees. You guys are grabbing all these people as gurus and mentors. You need to look a little deeper. Who is this guy for real? Because, look, there's no regulation on me saying I'm an expert. I could be an expert on everything.
But it's one thing to allow BS to go unchecked. There's nothing wrong with having a softer interview style if you're consistent about it. The problem with Patrick is that he acts like the opposite is true. So he actually brags about how much he loves confrontation and doing research.
The podcast demanding, I like to do research, I like to do good podcasts. I enjoy
confrontation.
I love it.
That's good.
I love it.
Unfortunately, he's capping. Patrick only chooses to confront and research his guests when it serves his career, not because of any actual principles he holds. For example, Patrick is a right-wing guy who has a mostly conservative audience, and when he brought the owner of The Hub and this other woman onto his podcast, the entire time, he at least tries to push back on the things they said. He clearly did a bit of research as he has stats and points to back things up, etc. It was an attempt to confront the bad people that he chose to platform, and regardless of how good or bad it was, I can appreciate that. The only real complaint I have is that this woman is wearing a cross while unconditionally defending The Hub for an hour and a half, which is the definition of blasphemy, and if I was a Christian man like Patrick, the Holy Spirit would have forced me to snatch that chain right off of her. But anyways, you can't deny that Patrick has the ability to research and confront his guests. The problem is, he picks and chooses when to do his homework, particularly when it aligns with his audience's values, and he's quick to forget those skills almost every time confrontation could hurt his bank account. And for the final spit in the face to his fans, he turns around and just verbally claims to have a reputation for asking tough questions.
I have a reputation to ask tough questions and piss some people like you off. That's my reputation.
But reputations are built on actions, not proclamations, and Patrick's actions tell a very different story. For example, Patrick's interview with Andrew Tate is an absolute masterclass in prioritizing pandering over principles, because Andrew made his fortune in the exact same industry as the Hub owner. But not only does Patrick conveniently forget to confront him on that, he actually runs defense for the Tates. But before we get into that, for context, Andrew and his brother Tristan have been formally charged with forming an organized crime group, human trafficking, and rape in Romania. For anyone who hasn't seen my last video, Andrew is by far, not even close, the most egregious liar on the entire internet, specifically about his criminal case, because he knows that most of his fans are Western and have no understanding of Romania's complex legal system, so he uses that against his fans to lie about every aspect of the case. To put this into perspective, he recently lied about the fact that his case was dismissed twice, 2 months in a row, in writing, which is physically impossible.
I don't lie about nothing. Maybe it's because I bring truth. Don't you understand? I'm bringing truth to the world.
So shortly after Andrew was initially released from his Romanian dungeon in June of 2023, Patrick did an interview with Andrew. Now, this was an amazing opportunity for Patrick to do an actual interview so the public could hear the other side of the story, especially given the fact that this was one of the biggest stories in the world at the time. But not only did Patrick manage to drop the ball with this interview, he got tackled, fumbled it, tore his ACL, got cut from the team, and then got CTE.
I couldn't even, like that, I couldn't feel my face. All my thoughts was coming out of my neck. Like I was running on neck thoughts, dude. I was fucking thinking with my neck, bro.
In all seriousness, this interview, which has 16 million views, is filled with propaganda, baseless conspiracy theories, and outright disinformation. Misinformation is one thing. Everyone is gonna get things wrong every now and then, and nobody walks on water, except me, of course. But when an interview is filled with deliberate misinformation, which isn't challenged at all in order to run defense for someone who's been formally charged with human trafficking, that is a problem. For example, the most recurring piece of disinformation, which Patrick allows Andrew to get away with throughout the interview, is the lie that Andrew claims to have been arrested for human trafficking based on some sort of a magical Matrix attack.
When you stand up for something, they end up trying to put you in jail. When you're a good person trying to do good, the evil, the Matrix as a whole, is going to try and throw you in jail. That's what they do. That's the punishment for it. You think I'd be on the internet talking like I talk and fighting the Matrix in my skeletons in my closet if I was actually a bad person? I've been vilified all across the Matrix in every single possible way. The Matrix is also putting lies about me, purport by the Matrix. The Matrix isn't after you. I talk about the Matrix all the time.
The Matrix was attacking you.
As high level as this Matrix attack is, I still don't believe a Romanian judge should put me in jail. And the Matrix is actually a perfect, absolute explanation of what's happening. I could have never seen this Matrix attack. It's garbage. It's a Matrix attack from head to toe.
The word Matrix is mentioned 40 times in this 5-hour interview, and not once does Patrick stop Andrew and say, The Matrix is not even close to the reason why you were in jail, Andrew. The claims you're making are psychotic. The real reason Andrew was in jail is because of well-documented investigations into serious alleged crimes that began several months before anyone even knew who Andrew was. Andrew got his home raided in April of 2022 because of a report to the Romanian police about the unlawful deprivation of liberty involving victim 1 and others, which then led to further investigations into more serious offenses. April of 2022 was months before Andrew even became famous in the summer of 2022, so that fact alone discredits the Matrix narrative 100%.
And by the way, there's no fucking Matrix. Okay, the Matrix is get me this, get me that, bullshit. Your own words, your own actions is what's putting you where you are.
This is pertinent information which debunks this false narrative completely, which isn't hard to find online at all. But instead of Patrick pushing back on this conspiracy, using a tad bit of common sense, he allows this nonsense with zero basis in reality to be accepted as fact throughout the entire Matrix circle jerk without once even bothering to ask,
what is the Matrix?
That's all Patrick would have to say. I mean, let's be honest here, Patrick is a 46-year-old man, and he's a professional liar. He knows this Matrix thing doesn't really add up at all if you just think about it for more than 30 seconds, but Patrick chose to not push back on these lies because this interview is an advertisement and not an actual interview.
So in my current court case, we have 2 Americans who lied, the ones who we have the conversations between them saying they're going to get an Oscar for lying to the police. We have the CCTV of them coming and going. We have their Uber records showing they can travel the country freely. We have their phone calls with their mother where they're saying, yeah, he didn't hurt me, and my boyfriend caught me. We have all of it. We have all the evidence.
First of all, there's zero proof of innocence that Andrew has presented to the court in this case. He talks about things like CCTV and Uber rides, but this investigation has been ongoing for about 3 years now, and none of the evidence that he has presented to the court has stopped the investigation or gotten the charges dismissed. In fact, the only reason why Andrew's not going through a trial right now is because of procedural errors which temporarily delayed the trial. But Andrew is an honest man. So next he says there are only 2 victims, and in the very next sentence he claims to have seen the dossier and dismisses it as garbage.
We have all of it. We have all the evidence. We have those 2. And then there's nobody else who could possibly even take the stand. I don't believe, as high level as this Matrix attack is, I still don't believe a Romanian judge is going to put me in jail with the dossiers. I've seen it. It's garbage. I don't think I'm going to end up in jail. But it's just taking years of my life, damaging my influence, having bad things to say about me, keeping me under control, keeping me locked in a house. That's all they want to do. They have no interest in the truth.
But if he had actually read the dossier, he'd know that there are 7 alleged victims, not 2. It's impossible to see any dossier associated with this case and walk away thinking there are only 2 victims, unless, of course, you can't read. Here's the initial indictment, and here's victim 7's testimony. Why in the world would there be a victim 7 if there's only 2 victims? Do they skip the numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 in Romania? Or is Andrew lying? And from Patrick's perspective, it's even worse. It would take less than a minute of research to find out there are more than 2 victims and correct this lie. Even on the press release, right after they were initially taken into custody 6 months before this interview, it specifically says 6 injured persons were identified who were exploited by the organized crime group. So either Patrick didn't bother to do 30 seconds of research before this interview, or he's intentionally allowing these lies to slide, and there is no in-between given how basic this information is. But in his defense, there are certain times where Patrick and his co-host, Adam, do ask tough questions like this.
This is a heinous charge, or allegedly. I mean, this is not lightweight stuff. You famously ran a webcam business. Correct. Perfectly legal, nothing wrong with that. I mean, I can't tell you how many women are doing OnlyFans these days, webcam business. How much of a reason was that, a correlation, for the human trafficking, the sex trafficking, the webcam business? How much did they correlate that to? Well, he must be human trafficking, he's running a webcam business. There's no correlation.
Zero correlation.
So they haven't even charged any of the webcam business, any of this.
Zero. And what's crazy is...
It's crazy. People assume that, right?
It's crazy because 1, it's not legal, and 2, you can go drive down the high street of Romania. There's webcam studios. It's one of the most popular businesses in the country. It's not even legal. And that was a past life. You're talking about something that happened 10 years ago.
It was that long ago?
It was about 10 years ago, yeah. It was at the very beginning of it. The very beginning of the whole idea of that industry.
Although that was an attempt to confront Andrew, there's no point in asking a question like that if you don't correct the lies told in response. The webcam business has a lot to do with the case. It's mentioned constantly in the indictment, and Andrew's webcam business was not 10 years ago. That's undeniable. According to his own words, almost everything Andrew said in that clip has no basis in reality. And if Andrew is confidently lying about things that he knows are verifiably false, and he knows that Patrick will help him get away with these lies, why would he tell the truth? So obviously Andrew lies incessantly throughout the entire 5-hour interview, and Patrick just sits there and smiles. For example, he lies completely about the lung cancer story. He claims to have been arrested for human trafficking because of TikTok. None of the alleged victims are actually victims, but I covered all that in my last video, so I don't want to rehash it. But the main thing which solidified this interview as intentional disinformation for the Tates to me was what Patrick let Andrew get away with here.
My brother was put in jail for being my brother. He hasn't said any videos. He hasn't said anything on the internet. He hasn't said any of the things I've supposedly said. He's never, the Matrix isn't attacking him. The BBC doesn't print about him, nothing. Why was Tristan Tate in jail? Because it's Tate brothers. So they just took him and threw him in a cell.
I actually don't think Andrew could have strung together a collection of words that were less true. Tristan wasn't just some innocent bystander, he was an active participant in the alleged organized crime group. And if Patrick wasn't an active participant in the Tate's disinformation campaign, he would have mentioned that the human trafficking case Tristan has been charged with exposed the fact that he once said, "Primarily, I'm going to work these bitches like slaves. I work them like slaves. No, work like slaves. Minimum 10 or 12 hours a day." Or maybe he'd mentioned that victim 1 stated that Tristan threatened to find her and punish her if she attempted to escape. Or maybe he'd mentioned the group chat Tristan was in with 2 of the other defendants called Pimps, where they specifically detailed how to divide the money, manipulate the victims, and carry out physical or psychological aggressions against them. So I'm not saying Patrick needs to be a scholar on the case, but I do think it's fair to set the bar at basic information. But not only did Patrick fail to challenge Andrew on his lies, he actually managed to do the exact opposite of that. He uses the disinformation that Andrew told him and then regurgitates it as a way to cover for Andrew's brother, Tristan, by starting their interview together like this.
When we read the stories about why, Andrew's gone to prison, or Andrew this, or this woman came out, or that woman came out, why did you go to jail? Why did you get banned? Why did they take your Instagram down? I mean, I remember the pictures. It was all cars and suits and motivational stuff. So is it guilty by association?
It is guilty by association. I hate to say it, but I'm fully aware that I would not have been banned or cancelled or probably ended up in jail if I wasn't Andrew's brother.
Notice how the question in and of itself intentionally conflates 2 entirely separate issues. The fact that Tristan was banned was guilty by association. Tristan didn't just so happen to break the TOS of every large social media platform all in the same week Andrew just so happened to get banned. That is undeniable. But the deplatforming and the criminal case have nothing to do with each other. One is a criminal investigation, which began in April of 2022. The deplatforming was a violation of subjective rules, which happened in August of 2022. And last time I checked, deplatforming and human trafficking have very little in common. I'm sure we can all agree one is a lot more serious than not being able to post selfies on IG as a 35-year-old man. But Patrick asked the question in that way because he's trying to paint Tristan as a victim of a conspiracy instead of actually attempting to find out the truth behind the criminal investigation.
I'm able to isolate areas that Tate crushes the globalists and crushes the people of power that love to bully. And I'm able to isolate that and say, man, what a freaking way of doing it. Good for you, guy. Keep challenging the status quo and keep pushing these guys. But I'm able to isolate and say, what are you doing sending audio recordings on WhatsApp Do you think you're untouchable? None of us are.
Let's just say, for the sake of argument, Tate does in fact crush globalists. That needs to be isolated from the fact that he's been charged with human trafficking and the fact that the evidence is damning if you actually look into it. Whether you love or hate someone, personal opinions of an individual should be irrelevant when it comes to a criminal case. And if you watch these interviews in full, it is 100% undeniable that Patrick didn't actually isolate anything from his burning passion for the Tate brothers. Instead, he allowed Andrew and Tristan to look him in the eyes and lie right to his face for 6 hours straight.
By default, he's attacked by the Matrix in a way that ends up with him being thrown in prison.
I was a pimp, but the majority of my money wasn't made in fighting. My money was actually made in the pimp game. So I guess in many ways I was a digital pimp. I know how to make sure the girl can't run away. Because once you teach a girl how to do this, she has the ability to make unlimited money from home. Why would she still give it to you? I could have never seen this Matrix attack coming. And I was a pimp. So I was a pimp in that sense.
Are you a fantasist?
I'm not a fantasist.
Do you have a persona that's just not you?
Of course not. I am me.
Well, if you are you, why would you repeatedly call yourself a pimp and then now say you've never been a pimp?
That's not a Matrix attack. Tell me what is possibly else.
And when the Tate's indictment became public information, not once did Patrick spend even 2 minutes actually covering the indictment on his show. And that is quite odd to me because Patrick himself claimed that Tristan is only involved in the case because he's guilty by association, and he didn't question any of Andrew's lies, so clearly he doesn't have a huge issue with anything Andrew said. But if what Andrew said was true, wouldn't Patrick be passionate about exposing the injustices happening to the Tates? Based on his actions and not his words, Patrick doesn't even actually believe any of the nonsense the Tates told him, and he knows that if the actual facts of the case were discussed in depth on his show, it would contradict almost everything that Patrick chose to broadcast to 16 million people. Obviously, Patrick can cover whatever he wants on his own show, but it is odd to me that they never covered the indictment because they've spent hours of runtime covering the details of the Diddy case, but not even 5 minutes discussing the details of the Tate indictment. I mean, the Tate interviews are 2 of Patrick's biggest interviews ever, so his audience is clearly interested in the case, and as of now, both Diddy and the Tates are innocent until proven guilty by the court, right? But the difference between the two is that Patrick can use one of them to own the libs, and the other is apparently crushing globalists by tweeting 70 times a day and pretending to be a devout Muslim man by scamming his own fans through crypto pump and dumps.
If you're here, let's just say you're trying to be as neutral and moderate as possible with anybody you're interviewing. Okay, if we know 5% you're for the guy, we're okay with it. That's fine. I can respect that. But if you do an interview and you go 25% this side, you're not doing an interview. You're hanging out with a friend is what you're doing.
Forget hanging out with a friend. What if the guy you're interviewing signs up as an influencer on the app you own where you make a 20% commission from every single sale he makes, so you actually have a direct financial incentive to make sure your friend doesn't get exposed so you can make more money? If 25% biased is too far, isn't 100% biased even worse?
The moment you forget that the salary you're getting paid is because of people that are tuning in, and they're walking away because you lost your journalistic integrity because it's all about pandering to an audience that you don't want to share the other side of the story. You don't want to share the other side of the story.
Don't get me wrong, I don't expect every interview to be some sort of a heated debate or an argument. Like, for example, when Tucker interviewed Putin, just let the guy say his piece and don't end up in a ditch. But when you're the guy who claims to love confrontation and doing research, it's probably not enough to just show up completely unprepared and let your guests just spew unchallenged BS just so they can protect their image and so you can pander to their audience. Another great example of this is the interview Patrick did with Alex Jones right after he got deplatformed. But before we get into that, we have to understand why Alex even got banned in the first place. Back in 2018, Alex was removed from all the large social media platforms, and although I generally don't agree with suppressing someone's platform or the precedent that it set back in 2018, the reason why Alex got banned was inarguably valid. It was because he exposed big poison.
What do you think tap water is? It's a gay bomb, baby. I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay. Do you understand that? Serious crap.
In all seriousness, Alex isn't just a meme, unfortunately. The main thing which got him banned was the fact that Alex continuously went on the air and said that the incident at Sandy Hook in 2012 was a government psyop that never actually took place in an attempt to increase gun control.
The official story of Sandy Hook has more holes in it than Swiss cheese. My gut tells me the White House, people controlling the governments were involved in this. So don't ever think the globalists that have hijacked this country wouldn't stage something like this. They kill little kids all day, every day. And it's not our government, it's the globalist. I mean, they're doing it. They're doing it. They're staging it. I've had the investigators on. I've had the state police have gone public. You name it. The whole thing is a giant hoax. And the problem is, how do you deal with a total hoax? They stage Sandy Hook. The evidence is just overwhelming. But, the Newtown kids, they take them, put them in our face, tell us their names, who they were.
Sandy Hook was never fake. It was a real tragedy where more than 20 families lost their children and 6 staff members passed away. And there was never an ounce of evidence which proved otherwise. But it's one thing to be wrong. We're all wrong sometimes. That's totally human. However, because Alex went on the air and repeatedly misled his clinically insane audience about how the whole thing was just a hoax with paid actors, certain InfoWars fans then started harassing the families of the victims. One of the parents came out and specifically said Alex Jones has made his life a living hell, and said he has endured online abuse, anonymous phone calls, and harassment on the street. Another said the harassment from Alex and his fans was so relentless that he had to move 3,000 miles away. So there's no doubt that Alex didn't exactly help the situation here.
So not only are their kids being killed, but they have to deal with someone harassing them and saying you're a liar and you're an actor. It's insanity.
And when Patrick brought Alex onto his podcast shortly after he was deplatformed in 2018, Patrick came vastly underprepared and clearly didn't have a grasp for how bad Alex truly is, and as a result of this, he essentially allowed Alex to paint himself as a victim. For example, the biggest lie Alex tells throughout the entire interview is that he's just being taken out of context and that the media is lying about him.
They build a straw man. And then they don't want me to respond. They want to ban me so they can then misrepresent what I've said and what I've done. What have I said that's so damn evil? Because the mainstream media projects what I've said and done, and because they've created that straw man, they don't want me to be able to respond. So I've already said I'm sorry the media took it out of complex 10,000 times.
Now, I'd be the first to admit that right-wing creators have faced harsher treatment on social media and from the mainstream media. But what Alex is doing here is using the media bias to position himself as a martyr. However, what's coincidentally never mentioned by either Patrick or Alex is that the full context is actually far worse than anyone can ever fully represent on a mass scale. Because even if someone did spend days of their life compiling all the clips of Alex denying Sandy Hook, no one wants to watch 30 minutes of clips of someone repeatedly telling the exact same lie, worded slightly differently. But if you want to see it for yourself, this is a 2-hour deposition of Alex live reacting to clips of himself denying Sandy Hook between the years 2012 up until late 2017. And in this same deposition, he also admits on video that Sandy Hook was real. So by his own admission, the years he spent publicly calling the grieving families crisis actors was never based in reality. And just so we're all on the same page about how much worse the full context is, here's Alex's co-host doxing one of the victim's parents live on the air 3 years after the incident.
Starting into 2015, you learned that a Sandy Hook parent named Leonard Posner was behind a group called Honor Network, correct? That was fighting online abuse of Sandy Hook victims?
I did, I think.
And when you learned that, you told your viewers that Honor was run by Mr. Posner, you showed addresses being used by Mr. Posner, and you said he needed to be investigated in Florida. Didn't you say that?
Objection is to form.
No. He's been getting all kinds of grief from Mr. Posner. Anything that comes out, social media shut down due to Sandy Hook false copyrights. What's interesting is they list the address for the Honor Network in Boca Raton, Florida. You look up the address on that, which says, you think, you know, if they had this organization, they would have some sort of headquarters where they would be setting up a memorial.
Well, we'll just start investigating that. I guess I'm going to have to probably go on up to Newtown. I'm going to have to, probably go investigate Florida as well.
So this is the guy crying about the context. This guy should literally be on his knees begging the general public not to look into the full context, because it is far worse than anyone can represent in a time-sensitive manner. And although it's not Patrick saying any of these things, by not shutting down these blatant lies, then broadcasting that to 3 million people, Patrick is allowing Alex to use his platform to rehabilitate his image based on lies.
Within a year or two, I said, no, I think Sandy Hook happened. Mass shootings happened.
Flashback.
I don't know what really happened with Sandy Hook, folks. We've looked at all sides. We played devil's advocate from both sides. But, I mean, it's as phony as a $3 bill.
End of flashback.
Within a year or two, I said, no, I think Sandy Hook happened. The media, as soon as I said I thought it happened, because I'd questioned it before, went, oh my God, we've got him.
But just to make this clear, this Alex Jones interview is not like the Tate interview. This was before Patrick became a partisan hack, so he does try to push back. For example, he spends half the interview repeatedly saying that Alex gets in trouble because he over-sensationalizes.
Here's the story. This is what the story is, okay? You add stacks on top of the stacks, on top of the stuff, and top of the stuff, and you over-sensationalize. And you're getting me to say, wait a minute, this conspiracy got a little deeper, and you're getting people to take action on it. Because you overly sensationalize, you make me take the credibility out of what's coming out of your mouth.
But even when he challenges Alex, he completely misses the mark, because Alex's issue isn't that he over-sensationalizes. Without sensationalizing, nobody would even know who Alex is. The real issue here is that Alex used the all press is good press strategy to become one of the most famous men in the entire world, but when that same strategy started getting him in trouble, he cried and claimed to be unfairly targeted. So Patrick's fixation on sensationalism as the core issue is purely surface level and completely ignores the real issue, which is that Alex isn't a martyr or a victim of unjust persecution. He's someone who is simply held accountable for his actions.
I feel good because I'm not a sellout and I'm a trailblazer and people project who I am. They lie about me all day.
Yeah, the guy who sells anti-aging supplements for $150, but somehow managed to age 20 years in 8 years, totally isn't a sellout. We definitely don't need a correction there. But putting the snake oil aside, the next lie Patrick allows Alex to get away with was about Pizzagate. In case you're not familiar with Pizzagate, in 2016, a man shot up a random pizza place in Washington, D.C. because there was a conspiracy going around that there was an undercover trafficking ring in the basement of this specific pizzeria. However, this pizza shop didn't even have a basement, so yet again, this story had no basis in reality. But, of course, Alex reported on this conspiracy, and as usual, he was right.
Real. This is on Infowars.com. Pizzagate is real. The only question is, what exactly is it?
This was a huge story back in 2016, and just like Sandy Hook, this was a real-life problem that Alex definitely contributed to. And in the interview, Patrick brings it up, and once again, Alex lies right to his face and to the entire audience.
What if it was just purely educational? What if it was just, I'm going to give you the info?
There's no doubt when I see the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN saying the conspiracy theorists say there's a sex club in this place in D.C., and then we cover it, and then they say I did it. You better believe now I don't cover that.
Is it fair to say that...
Do you understand that I never covered that pizza place until the Washington Post, the New York Times, and CNN did? And then 4chan, which is a bunch of operatives, supplied all the BS, and then my reporters covered it. You understand, we didn't create that story.
But you have been talking about parts of that story.
No, the media.
Are you talking
people
specific?
On the street? People on the street walk up and they go, "F you, Pizzagate," and I'm like, I didn't create that story.
Although it's true Alex didn't create the story, and other major outlets did in fact cover the story before him, these are just deflections. Other outlets criticized the conspiracy and tried to debunk it. Alex legitimized it by unironically reporting on the story and widened its reach past niche online forums. To put into perspective how ridiculous of a deflection this is, when Alex reported on Pizzagate, he specifically said this.
Now, I want to be clear, not everybody in the WikiLeaks is involved in this, clearly. You have to go investigate it for yourself. But I will warn you, this story that's been the biggest thing on the internet for several weeks, Pizzagate as it's called, is a rabbit hole that is horrifying to go down. Now,
it's not a coincidence that the shooter was a fan of the InfoWars Facebook page and that he also admitted to listening to Alex's radio show. And Alex even formally apologized for his false coverage of the Pizzagate situation, which proves that even Alex himself knows that he's at least somewhat guilty in this case scenario. Yet, when he goes on the propaganda podcast, all of the blame is able to be shifted onto other news outlets because Patrick clearly had no idea what he was talking about. And this is the difference between earning your platform versus buying your platform. Any reasonable interviewer can do an hour or two of research, but all Patrick does in this interview is pretend like he's done research, when in reality, all he does is scratch the surface. So I'm not saying Patrick needs to do 50 hours of research before each interview to correct every single piece of misinformation ever said on his podcast, but when you choose to bring on someone this controversial, there's probably a good reason why they're so controversial. And I think any interviewer with a shred of integrity who chooses to platform someone this contentious would do an hour or two of research just to push back with basic information to counter the lies they tell. Patrick did not do that here. Sometimes he acts like he does, but it's about completely irrelevant issues.
Sometimes you get criticism because some people say, well, Alex never bashes Nazis. You know, a lot of times they'll say, you know, he is so nice to them. He is so kind to them. He is so gentle with them.
Wow, these are some world-class interviewing skills here. Instead of calling the guy out for the numerous lies he told him right to his face, Patrick wastes breath on this irrelevant question that completely deflects from any sort of real issue.
So what do you think about him?
Nazis?
Yes.
Well, they lost World War II and they're losers. And the KKK and groups like that are a joke. But it's saying, what do you think of child molesters?
Do you think they still exist?
Let me ask you, what do you think of child molesters?
I don't even know what Patrick was expecting the guy to say to this right after getting banned and attempting to plead his innocence. Even if Alex hypothetically loved that group of people, he's not going to come out and say, oh yeah, I love those guys, they're my favorite. They're basically just playing patty cake at this point. But look, maybe Patrick was lobotomized when he interviewed Alex the first time around. To be fair, they did do that interview only a week after Alex was banned, and that was before PBD became the political powerhouse that he is today. But by the second interview, Patrick had fully transformed into his final evolution, the Persian pyramid propagandist. And this time around, instead of even trying to hold Alex accountable for his deranged behavior, Patrick chose the safer route, pandering. Why? Because pandering pays and brings in the subs. So Patrick started the podcast off like this.
But this is the first thing I want to talk about from my standpoint. So Sandy Hook, we're not talking Sandy Hook. We're not talking Sandy Hook. What I want to talk to you about is they came out, if you can pull up this article, with a fine of, this is Sandy Hook families want Alex Jones to pay up $2.75 trillion in damages.
So we're not going to talk at all about what Alex actually did, but we're only going to focus on the punishment he got for it. He refuses to talk about the fact that Alex stood on the graves of dead children to push a baseless conspiracy theory over the course of 5 years. But the punishment? That is irrational, because Alex is actually the victim when it comes to Sandy Hook.
And by the way, the media will say I'm denying it. 4 years ago on your show, I said I thought it happened. I said it 7 years ago, I thought it happened.
But here's my question.
The media just went and took a few things out of context and blew it up.
You cannot make this up. Years later, Patrick is still doing the exact same thing, failing to bring up important information when someone lies directly to his face, and then pretending to ask difficult questions later in the interview.
Why do you constantly find yourself getting in trouble? What is it about Alex Jones? Some will say well, they're afraid of what Alex has to say. And some of the stuff with vaccine got you in trouble with, you know, Sandy Hook, with the pizza, with all these other things. But why do you think they are trying to do this to you?
Although they, whoever they actually are, orchestrated his downfall, the real truth is much simpler. Alex gave the social media companies the perfect reason to ban him by saying words which led to real-world harm. And although every rational person understands that it's fine to get things wrong, Alex clearly doesn't care about right and wrong. He cares about conspiracies because he has a monetary incentive to tell his audience that everything is a conspiracy. And of course, not once in this 3-hour podcast does anyone acknowledge the real problem with people like Alex, which is that Alex is on the conspiracy team. So whether he's right or wrong about a particular subject, he wants everything to be a conspiracy in order to fulfill his confirmation bias. And that makes him just as bad as the people who believe everything the mainstream media tells them without question. And as Patrick himself said before he became a full-time right-wing grifter,
you may want to minimize the amount of time you give and credence you give to a lot of conspiracy theories you read.
Yeah.
Don't go too deep into it. Some people are going to say, that's how you hold people accountable. This is why people get away, because somebody like you says a comment like this. I didn't tell you I sit there and I say we shouldn't do something. I didn't tell you any of that stuff. All I'm saying is some people, it ruins their lives, their marriage, their relationship, the way they do business, the way they parent. I can't tell you how many people I've seen go down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories actually ruin their life.
Shut up! You don't have free speech, you understand? You listen to me. I rule this country now. I'm liberal. Screw him! Ban his free speech right now! Ban it!
Patrick has gone from giving rational, nuanced warnings to running defense for objectively insane conspiracy theorists for profit. And I think it's fair to say that is changing for the worse. And ultimately, I think Patrick's willingness to have Alex on his show multiple times without even trying to hold him accountable for his insanity proves where his priorities lie. Cultivating controversy for clout, even if it means co-signing truly evil people like Alex.
We need accountability. We need to find out what happened. We need to find out if they did the right thing or not. We need to find out what happened with
Andrew Tate.
I simply want accountability. We need to find out what
Jones
did. Why are we forgetting about the fact what happened with
Sandy Hook?
I simply want accountability. Because without accountability, you know what you're telling the world? You know what you're telling the world when there's no accountability? It's like if your kid does something and there's no punishment, guess what you're telling them? You can do it again and again and again.
How is it fair for Patrick to brand himself as the guy who needs accountability and thrives on confrontation when he's clearly negligent in those things at convenient times? In this interview, he confronts Thomas Russo, the leader of a far-right white supremacist group, or in this interview, he confronts the Liver King after his steroid use was exposed. But when it's figures like Tate or Jones, whose notoriety boosts his brand, Patrick helps their narrative and completely ignores the harm they perpetuate. To me, the pattern is clear. Patrick challenges guests when their reputations are already in shambles or when it's easy to score points. But when it comes to figures who bring Patrick clout and money, Patrick becomes complicit and instead enables whatever they say instead of questioning them.
By the way, what's the opposite of challenging? Pandering. And just telling people what they want to hear.
Putting politics aside for a second, I think Patrick's interview with Ryan Garcia is another great example of Patrick conveniently forgetting to challenge his guests' blatant lies because it benefits his bank account. In case you don't know Ryan, he's a 25-year-old professional boxer who's used social media very well over the years to significantly boost his relevance. However, in the build-up to his last fight with Devin Haney, Ryan essentially had some sort of a manic episode where he was doing and saying some crazy stuff. Out of all the insane things he did and said, some of the worst include lying about knowing who killed Tupac, lying about donating $20 million to children in Gaza, lying about being in the back rooms at the Vatican. He also faked his own death, then posted the fake proof onto his own Twitter account while he was still alive. And for the final nail in the coffin, he lied about getting captured and taken to Bohemian Grove and being forced to watch unspeakably bad things.
Bro, I don't give a fuck
bro. They held me down and they made me watch little kids get raped. I don't give a fuck anymore.
Where?
Bro, they fucking took me to the fucking woods, bro, and they fucking tied. I'm not fucking joking, bro. I have fucking proof, bro. I don't give a fuck. Bro, I fucking will show you every fucking video you could ever fucking believe. Bohemian Grove is real. They fucking tied me down and they made me fucking watch, dog.
And when Patrick brought Ryan onto his show after his fight with Devin Haney, Patrick gave Ryan the perfect opportunity to dismiss all of his actions and statements leading up to the fight.
Was this all an act? What part of it was real? Tell us about it.
I mean, my cameraman Chance, Ajay's there. Hey, we have it pre-recorded months ago. What did I say was gonna happen? I said, I'm about to make sure everybody thinks I'm gonna go crazy. I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. Watch, it's gonna be called the Great Escape. Like, I have it all documented. I was already planning it, you know, weeks and weeks and months behind. I don't know what made me come up with the idea, honestly. I just, one day just decided just to go all in and just commit to a plan that I had, and I was not going to budge for nobody.
So that's the entire basis of the podcast, that Ryan trolled the internet and everything he did and said was just a character to sell the fight. The thing is, Ryan wasn't just playing some character the entire time, and there are actions which prove that definitively. For example, Ryan was arrested about a month and a half after the fight for vandalism. Around that same time, he also broke into his ex-wife's home and destroyed her personal belongings. He also missed weight for the fight for the first time in his career, which ended up costing him millions of dollars and a chance at the title. In addition to that, he tested positive for Ostarine, which is a performance-enhancing drug, and that got his win stripped away and got him suspended from boxing for a year, which is his full-time job. Those aren't all the actions of someone who was just playing a character to sell a fight. Those are all real-world actions which didn't sell a single additional pay-per-view. And the problem with PBD allowing Ryan to use the trolling defense completely unchallenged is that it allows someone who's clearly going through some sort of mental issues an easy out, instead of encouraging him to get the help that he very clearly needs. Of course, Ryan was trying to sell a pay-per-view event, so it does make sense to do and say certain things which might otherwise be considered extreme because he was trying to make money. But when you flat out lie about very, very serious subjects like donating to starving children or trafficking, that's probably not something that should be excused as playing the character. But of course, in typical PBD fashion, Patrick does pretend to confront Ryan about some of his outrageous claims, but instead of holding him accountable, he allows Ryan to double down.
The kids, did you actually have videos of kids, things that
I actually do. I do have videos.
You have videos?
Yes, we have videos.
Who has seen them? Who have you shown them to?
The guy Jaco. He has them. We're gonna go to Congress with it.
Has anybody else here seen them? Have you guys seen the videos?
No, they have not seen them.
You guys have never seen the videos? Okay, so you've not shown it to anybody else. It's just you and him that have.
Yeah.
Now, is it something you have access to or he has access to?
We both do.
You both have access to. Okay. Why haven't you shown it yet? If you have those videos?
I'm just not gonna put that on the internet. And then there's also other people that have videos and you know, they're victims, but I'm not gonna put that on the internet. That's disgusting.
We are reaching levels of grift in the podcast space that is beyond human comprehension. Let's really think about what Ryan just said. He apparently has evidence of a trafficking ring on his phone, and instead of everyone walking off right that second and reporting that evidence to the FBI, they're talking about it on a podcast.
I am tired of Earth. These people. I'm tired of being caught in the tangle of their lives.
And it's now been more than half a year since this podcast took place, and Ryan still hasn't gone to Congress. And he's never gonna go to Congress because the supposed evidence he claimed to have never existed. This wasn't just a harmless slip-up or a mistake. This is an egregious lie that he created in his mind so he can make more money. I'm guessing here, but I think Patrick has the self-awareness to know that Ryan is lying, but of course, not once does he stop Ryan and say, hey, can I at least see some of the supposed evidence you have, just so I can confirm how insane you are? Instead, he just lets it slide, then he broadcasts that negligence to millions of people.
I have a reputation to ask tough questions.
Patrick also pretends to confront Ryan on the $20 million Gaza pledge lie, And as you would expect, Ryan lies right to his face.
And I saw you allegedly pledges $20 million to
I wrote
Gaza
that
after
in the
fights.
tweet, yeah.
So you're giving you're pledging $20 million to
Yeah, but I gotta figure that out. You know, at the end of the day, I don't want people, you know, to misinterpret that. You know, I'm all about supporting children. So for me, I love everybody, and I'll leave it at that.
So I think Tate also said he'll match your $20 million.
Yeah.
I saw that. How's your relationship with Tate?
Any normal person would say, hey Ryan, you're kind of a scumbag for lying in writing about donating money to starving children to sell pay-per-views, but Patrick? So I don't know exactly what's wrong with Ryan. Clearly something is off here, but what I do know is that he probably needs people around him that can actually help him, not scumbags like PBD who are just trying to exploit whatever he's going through for views and money. And after their podcast with Ryan, about a week later it came out that Ryan had tested positive for PED usage, and PBD and his boys went on their show and had the audacity to defend Ryan from cheating.
Anybody that goes and says publicly they love Trump, notice how all of a sudden something bad happens to you, your career, your name. It's so weird. Cause like, by the way, you know a piss test comes back like that. That's why they wait till right now to come after him.
I actually don't understand how someone can be this delusional. If a pro boxer tests positive for steroids, it's probably not because of their political opinions, it's probably because both the A and B samples definitively proved that Ryan had performance-enhancing drugs in his system. That's not meaningful commentary, that's strategically blind loyalty to bring in followers disguised as analysis. And although I can appreciate the fact that Patrick is loyal to the people around him, unconditional loyalty should be reserved for family or very, very close friends, not some guy who you made a few bucks off of by having them on your podcast.
I think you need to be selfish 70% of the time. But 60 to 70% of the time, I do think you need to be selfish and make those decisions for yourself. But the additional 20, 30, 40% where you need to be selfless, I think you need to also be thinking long-term.
I completely agree, but Patrick's behavior proves that he doesn't actually live by this ratio. He's 100% selfish 100% of the time. Just look at his interviews, whitewashing the Tate's reputations fresh out of jail, giving Alex Jones a perfect platform to rewrite history, and enabling Ryan Garcia's delusions. With that being said, Patrick is certainly not the guy known for confrontation or asking tough questions. The PBD podcast is the place to go if you want to watch someone get asked softball questions or confronted based solely on the guest's personal utility to Patrick's brand, rather than the validity of the words they say or their overall reputation. And putting Patrick's delusions about his interviewing skills aside, all of this makes no sense because on the Valuetainment website, it specifically says, our mission is to enlighten, entertain, and empower current and future leaders around the world.
You say you inform, educate, you entertain, yet you conceal, misinform, and your content's quite frankly boring. You're cherry picking on people that you're talking to.
Patrick is everything that he speaks out against. Nothing he does is about empowering future leaders. It's always about empowering Patrick.
I want to be able to call any prime minister, any president, any billionaire that is not afraid of the camera and is willing to talk with somebody that's going to be straight up with them, and they're going to say, yeah, 100% we're going to talk to PBD.
If Patrick's not already that guy, he'll absolutely be that guy in the future, because it doesn't actually matter how many people someone has murdered or trafficked or harassed. As long as someone has a pulse and can make Patrick some ad revenue, he's got the perfect platform to spew unchallenged propaganda.
I want a house in the hills I pay big bills for. I ain't got in pocket. I want to empty out my wallet. I want to stop motion, stand still. Wallace and Gromit. I want to talk more endlessly. I want to neurotically vomit. I want more dollars from my mama. I want a palace in Prada. I want a Gucci bag where I can store my sorrows and hardships. I want to gold plate my finance. I want endless tomorrows. I want a lot more than I got right now. But that's the problem.
At the end of the day, Patrick is certainly an interesting character. On one hand, the old Valuetainment videos still hold up today as great content for aspiring entrepreneurs to watch and learn from. But on the other hand, that content was never coming from a respectable entrepreneur, because real entrepreneurship is based on providing value to others and then getting paid for it. Patrick's company, PHP, was never based on providing value or helping people. It was about worsening the lives of others so he can make money. That's not a business, that's a scheme. And the fact that Patrick ran his MLM for so long proves one main thing to me. Patrick only has one goal in business: maximizing profits regardless of how scummy the method is. With that being said, why would his political career be any different? Did Patrick suddenly become a good person now that he's transitioned into politics and interviewing? Or is he still the same opportunist, just trading one grift for another? The reality is, Patrick is not the patriot he paints himself out to be. He's a profiteer who's always been driven by the simplest formula: telling people exactly what they want to hear and turning that trust into profit. And as his media enterprise grows and grows, which it absolutely, positively will, I can assure you, Patrick is only gonna get worse as time goes on.
Brother, I need real money. To have real money, you got to be willing to play ball. So I'm going after. Remember, I said I'm broke right now.
Realistically, why in the world would Patrick do anything differently if everything he's doing is working? If Patrick can sell an MLM for $300 million and walk away with his reputation intact, why would he not do that? If he can profit off of disinformation for a man accused of human trafficking without facing an ounce of backlash, why stop? Is he too ethical? The reality is, Patrick won't change, because not only has he gotten away with it, everything he's done has worked out incredibly well for him. And that's sad, because more than anyone else I've ever covered, I know a lot of people out there who actually look up to Patrick because he's sharp and charismatic. So over the years, he's been able to build this image of self-made success and relentless ambition, which actually works because in a lot of ways, I think Patrick is a great example of someone who has maximized their potential. He took the limited opportunities he had and turned that into an undeniable success story.
Listen, I am by far not the smartest guy. I'm not the most talented guy. I don't come from a family of wealth. My father was a cashier at a 99-cent store in Inglewood, 1.8 GPA kid. I went to the Army. I took an ASVAB, got a 31 on my ASVAB. This is not a product of I'm supposed to do whatever I'm supposed to do and be running a, whatever multi-million dollar company and doing what I'm not supposed to be where I'm at right now. I'm supposed to be a statistic.
Patrick has created something out of nothing. He served his country in the military, he entertains thousands of people on a daily basis, and he's made a lot of money. But as Patrick himself once said,
here's what you've been given with. Here's the talents we're giving you. Here's the life. Go do good with it and find a way to be better to my guys, my people, my kids. And then you get to choose to make bad decisions. We have a choice to make good decisions and bad decisions. That's not going away anytime soon. It's on us.
Patrick has made it abundantly clear which choice he's made, because MLM is a great thing for making money as long as you're at the top, but let's be honest, ruining people's lives for money is a bad thing. And this is where Patrick goes from grifter to genuine disappointment. Because if Patrick was able to make so much money doing MLM, there's no doubt that he also could have made a ton of money running a normal insurance company, or a real estate company, or a solar company, whatever. Maybe he would have made a little less money, but there's no question that Patrick would have been successful in just about anything else. And if he did that, he wouldn't be stuck with the reputation of a slimy MLM salesman for the rest of his life. And instead, he could have built something that he wasn't ashamed of. Or maybe something that doesn't contradict everything that he claims to stand for now.
We've made money God instead of leadership and values and principles. Like, don't get me wrong. You gotta have money to have a bigger mic, for sure. Yeah. But at what cost? At what cost?
At what cost is the question, because although Patrick has certainly achieved wealth and fame, behind every dollar Patrick made from PHP, there's people that were left broke, disillusioned, and betrayed.
I'm gonna do my part. Most money, you're gonna make the most money you've ever made in this industry, you're gonna make it with us. I don't care where you've been. You can make the most money here, because I'm gonna do the part for you.
Patrick lied his way to the top, and although a silver tongue might be able to cover a heart of stone, it can never change the truth. And the truth about Patrick is that he's exactly what happens when someone chooses to ignore right and wrong in the pursuit of success. And in my opinion, there's no point in becoming successful if all you've really done at the end of the day is take shortcuts which leave behind nothing but broken promises and wasted potential.
Everybody's greedy to a level, but then there's a different level of greed. And by the way, this next level of greed is what typically follows a massive fall and legacy collapses. You gotta know if you're getting close to that out of control greed. Because sometimes you may not even know about it, they're getting to this place here. Because typically when you get to this place here, these things shut off. You don't listen to anybody. All you're doing is listen to yourself. You just hear yourself. You don't hear anybody else, right? When you get to that level. When you get to out of control greed, you have to be so careful. Because like this, the 22 years that you put into this business to build it can be gone. The 7 years of 80-hour weeks you put into that business can be gone because of out of control greed.
So from the outside looking in, Patrick's story is in fact a representation of the American dream. The dream that tells us anyone has the potential to achieve upward mobility if they're ambitious and if they just work hard enough. But what Patrick completely failed to understand is that the American dream was never about holding others down just so we can move up. Even George Washington himself once said, "I hope I shall always possess firmness and virtue enough to maintain what I consider the most enviable of all titles, the character of an honest man." So Patrick's story isn't truly about the American dream. I would say it's more of a cautionary tale about the dark side of ambition. Because when ambition becomes a weapon, success becomes measured only by what you're willing to destroy to get it.
For those of us climbing to the top of the food chain, there can be no mercy. There is but one rule: hunt or be hunted.
If you like this video, you'll love this one about Patrick's boy, Andrew Tate, on the screen right now. Believe it or not, he's actually worse than Patrick. Or maybe this one on the screen right now about Ethan Klein. If you liked the video, like it. If you disliked it, dislike it. If you want to support the channel, you can become a member. And aside from that, I hope you all have a wonderful day.
What do I need to do to convert you into being gay? Can I give you $1 billion?